good, or do I need more light?
No, we want you to be in the dark. You're okay like that. Why you want light? I think, yes, I think we can see her. Eh? Jasper, I think
it's a little bit dark, but yes, we can see you though.
But Aya, can you read your statement? Can you see your statement?
Yes, Ambassador, I can.
But Jose of the Dominican Republic want to see you. He's saying put more light, and because of the demand, I will ask you to put more light. You know.
Yeah.
Felix, now you are live. Light or no light, you are live now. Okay. So please be careful of your remarks. Okay, as soon as Aya comes back, we'll start our program. I see she went out for a second.
I brought light.
Okay. Now, colleagues, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're going to begin our Arria-Formula. I'm sure you have a program with you. It has been circulated and distributed. I'm going to use that program to manage this meeting. First, I'm going to make very, very short opening remarks, and then we go into the program. To welcome all the briefers, participants, youth representatives from across the globe to the United Nations Youth Council Arria-Formula meeting on the youth, peace, and security under the theme capitalizing on intergenerational dialogue to build and sustain peace and enhance social cohesion at community level. I would like to take this opportunity to also particularly thank our co-host, Niger, St. Vincent and Grenadines, Tunisia, Dominican Republic, France, Ireland, Kenya, and Norway for co-hosting this very important meeting. SADC views this meeting as a significant to commemorate the 5th-year anniversary of the landmark resolution 2250. The unanimous adoption of resolution 2250 by the Security Council on this very day, 9 December 2015, was a significant achievement for youth, peace, and security YPS agenda, which was facilitated under the leadership of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. We are pleased that the delegation of Jordan is also participating in this meeting and will deliver a statement later. I believe the program for this meeting has been circulated to all participants. However, I will provide advance notice to the speakers according to the list in the program in front of me. This is how the picture looks like. First, I would like to introduce our briefers and invite them to brief the meeting in this order. They don't speak first, I introduce them, then I will call them one by one. We have Ms. Jasma, the General Envoy on Youth. She needs no introduction. You can see her broad smile. Then Ms. Aya, who just brought the light, the African Union Envoy on the Youth. Ahmed, the youth representative from Palestine. And my sister, Karabo, South African Ambassador on Youth, Peace, and Security. Now, the briefer start. So I will give the well-known figure and the person behind this spirit of the youth, Jasma, Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think you yourself have embodied the spirit of the youth very much, regardless of the numbers of years. President of the Security Council, Excellencies, colleagues, as we celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Landmark Resolution 2250 today, I want to take a moment to reflect on the important role that young peace builders around the world have played in shaping and advancing this agenda. As I'm sure you all will agree, it has been incredibly inspiring to see how this resolution has been a truly bottom-up effort from its very inception, with young people leading the way and being recognized for the first time by the Council for their positive contributions in this space. In contrast with the more traditional approach of the Security Council, the Youth, Peace and Security agenda has been about intergenerational inclusion right from the get-go, demonstrating the immense power of partnerships when we give young people the space and opportunity to drive international resolutions and policies. What has been perhaps most notable in this agenda has been the way it has shifted the global perspective from seeing young people either as perpetrators of victims of violent crimes into instead seeing them as equal partners for peace. It's incredible to think that it was not so long ago when one young peace builder we work with recalled hearing a delegate say, and I quote, "Your granddaughter won't even see the adoption of such a resolution," unquote. It was in the face of this opposition that young people pushed ahead in partnership with the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, and later working with the Security Council and its members to witness the unanimous adoption of Resolution 2250. Colleagues, to illustrate the important progress that has been made, I would like to focus on three key ways the world has changed in the past 5 years since the adoption of the resolution. First, and perhaps most relevant today, our societies have been shaken by the COVID-19 pandemic, with young people often on the front lines preventing the further outbreak of the virus, while at the same time strengthening social cohesion in their communities. We have seen so many examples around the world of young people persevering in the face of this adversity, demonstrating their immense resilience in the face of crisis. For example, the young women-led organization Mother of Hope Cameroon is using cartoon animated videos in French, English, and Pidgin to mobilize youth to combat the virus in their community. In India, volunteers from Youth for Peace International have set up a national mental health support helpline to provide counseling to people facing severe distress due to these uncertain times. These are just some of the quiet heroes around the world who, along with young healthcare workers and medical students, have put their lives and health at risk as they work to save lives of ours. Though heavily underfunded, these youth-led initiatives are making a notable difference. This reality must be reflected in our response and recovery plans. This is why I'm calling upon member states, UN, and the international community to increasingly invest in youth-led initiatives for COVID-19 prevention as a part of emerging socioeconomic response and recovery plans. Second, we have seen young people continue to raise their voices across the globe through marches, online campaigns, and other forms of mass action to hold their political leaders accountable on issues ranging from climate justice to anti-racism to gender inequalities. Too often, their exclusion from meaningful political participation continues to lead young people to create alternative avenues for participation. At the same time, we are observing increasing restrictions on civic space, whereby states and non-state actors are introducing laws and practices that inhibit young people's civic engagement. In response to these concerns, my office has commissioned an independent research on the threats and challenges to young people's civic spaces, which we will be publishing next year. Preliminary results of this research show that young people face a wide range of socio-cultural, digital, financial, physical, and legal threats, but often do not have anyone to turn to due to lack of resources and mistrust in formal institutions. In this respect, I also urge relevant governments, authorities to investigate cases of violence against peaceful protesters, including young people, and to protect young people's rights to freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and public participation. Third, as our dependency on information technology grows alongside the current pandemic, we must strengthen young people's safe and inclusive access to digital spaces and tools. More than ever, it's crucial to ensure that digital spaces leave no one behind, particularly as much of our work, education, learning, and generally lives are increasingly taking place online. At the same time, however, research shows that global digital divide is very real, with young people facing reduced digital access due to lack of resources, poor infrastructure, high expenses, as well as a lack of online safety due to harassment, disinformation, privacy violations, and government shutdowns. You might recall that earlier this year, a young woman peace builder from Yemen was unable to deliver her briefing to the Security Council due to an unstable internet connection. And even in my work before joining the UN, I remember having to purchase data, mobile data, out of my own pocket or out of my lunch money to take part in online events and international processes on issues that affected me and my peers. These are just a few examples. To address these challenges, I call on all member states, the UN system, and private sector partners to support young people's access to digital spaces and information technology while ensuring that their rights and safety are also protected online. We must not think that we are doing young people a favor by creating these spaces for them. It is our responsibility as member states and institutions, and it is their right to participate in public affairs that determine their future. Excellencies, allow me to conclude by sharing a few final reflections on where I would like to see the youth, peace and security agenda in another 5 years' time. To start, it is critical that we reach a point where this is a fully funded agenda with a substantial financial increase in youth-led peace building by member states, donors, and international organizations alike. In addition, I would like to see this an agenda that is fully supported by the UN system through a dedicated human resource base in headquarters and country level, as well as expertise and mechanisms for the meaningful engagement of young people and youth organizations in sustaining peace at national, regional, and global levels. Lastly, I would like to see this agenda firmly positioned at the country level with concrete implementation efforts, national action plans, including the creation of national youth, peace and security coalitions and roadmaps developed in partnership with young people. It is a basic human right to live in a peaceful world. It's also a basic human right to participate in important processes that determine our collective future. Young people are asking for peace and for a seat at the table to create and maintain that peace. Is that too much to ask? Thank you very much for your continued leadership and support.
I want to thank Ms. Yathma Virikamanayake, the United Nations Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, and remind the youth around the world that we are broadcasting live from the UN headquarters in New York through Twitter, YouTube, and other social networks. So the youth who are not speaking, please continue your mics being muted. I will now call the African Union Envoy on Youth, Ms. Aya Chebi, stationed in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Aya.
Thank you so much, Ambassador and President of the month of the Security Council, distinguished members of the United Nations Security Council, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by expressing my gratitude and the gratitude of African youth whom I represent to the Republic of South Africa for this invitation and for your leadership, your continuous leadership on the youth agenda. Mr. President, we have no shortage of policies. In fact, your esteemed council have adopted 3 resolutions on youth, peace and security, as well as the African Union Peace and Security Council adopted recently in June the Continental Framework on Youth, Peace and Security with 10-year implementation plan, which makes us the first continent to make such a milestone, which will really require a stronger collaboration among United Nations Security Council and African Union Peace and Security Council to ensure that we have synergies between these frameworks, especially in the development of national action plans under Africa's leadership. Excellencies, you have taken the responsibility and the commitment to harness the peace dividend. What we need now is to move from aspiration to implementation and from policies to mobilization for action. Now with COVID-19 forcing us to rethink the notion of security, the definition of threat. What is a threat? Is it climate change? Is it terrorism? Or is it COVID-19? We answer some of these questions in the policy paper on Africa Youth Challenges, Agency and Recovery Roadmap on COVID-19 that my office released last month, showing that despite the current challenges, African youth have exhibited unprecedented leadership and resilience in civic action, in community awareness, in fighting the misinformation, in using technology from Kenya to South Africa, from Tunisia to Niger, and many other countries. These have showing us that young people are committed to fight the pandemic, especially with the African Union efforts. We established the African Youth Front on Coronavirus, which has done a tremendous work in supporting Africa CDC continental response. The African Union also launched the Youth Silencing the Guns campaign in line with the theme of the year, galvanizing youth voices to silence the guns across the continent. And we have utilized every platform and tool available to engage young Africans. Through social media, we have reached over 48 million youth during the past 6 months. We engage youth in the creatives, music, and fashion industries, as the AU theme of 2021 is on arts, culture, and heritage. We engage young women by creating the first ever African Union feminist blog, Sauti, featuring the stories of peace building and resilience of 25 young women. And I'm sharing this because Your Excellency's innovative approaches and methods for youth engagement in peace and security agenda is imperative. Bringing millions of youth to the key frameworks of the Council is possible, but with new innovative ways, not old bureaucratic inefficient ways. Despite the disruption by COVID-19 outbreak, we have also taken this campaign to the grassroots. I recently visited South Sudan, where I witnessed over 1,000 guns voluntarily being handed over by young people in Rumbek, Lake State. The approach of voluntary disarmament through intergenerational dialogue with youth has proven to be more effective than forceful disarmament, which usually results in violence and potential rearmament. Therefore, implementing holistic disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration program with youth with an intergenerational approach is critical. Excellencies, I want to use today's briefing to present the policy report on youth silencing the guns intergenerational dialogues in line with today's theme. This report is the result of 6 regional dialogues convened with youth from North, South, East, West, Central, and Diaspora regions. 1,800 participated, including displaced and refugee youth, youth in rural areas, informal settlement, youth with disability, and young women, as well as civil society organizations, AU commissioners, regional economic communities, the United Nations partners, and member states. We can testify that, based on the 100 intergenerational dialogues we convened over the past 2 years, this approach works, and it helps enhance cooperation between different stakeholders. These 6 intergenerational dialogue resulted eventually in the African Youth Declaration on silencing the guns with 10 concrete recommendations. In the interest of time, I'd like to highlight 4 key relevant issues for our discussion today. First, why do we need intergenerational dialogue? Because the average age of African heads of state and government is 64, when the average age of the population is 20. The only way to bridge a 44 years generation gap is intergenerational co-leadership. Africa is considered the youngest population in the world, the youngest continent, with 65% of our population under 30. But conflict on the continent is aggravated by the lack of communication and collaboration between generations. Intergenerational co-leadership can be a powerful preventive approach to address current and emerging crises and conflict by creating a common ground to build trust from the community to the highest level of decision-making. We urgently need intergenerational solidarity, generational healing, and generational accountability. Participation only with a seat at the table does not guarantee young people's voices are heard, but with co-leadership in mediation, in negotiations, within missions, at the design and implementation of national action plans, then young people can find meaningful ways to co-lead and contribute to peace. 2, young people are urging you to silence youth unemployment. Job security emerged as top priority across all 6 regions of Africa during the dialogues. With the rapid urbanization, the biggest threat to our continent is mass unemployment. We need to end economic and climate change forced migration of youth from the continent, especially the impact on youth in the Sahel and Lake Chad region. That is why we need to incorporate human security to YPS agenda. We need to move from youth peace and security to youth peace and development, from a militarization focus to a humanized and dignity-centric focus. 3, young women are urging you to criminalize gender-based violence in all its forms, especially in conflict, in displacement, in humanitarian settings, including femicide, rape, harmful practices, trafficking, and other forms of sexual exploitation. Last month, I also visited Namibia and listened to the Shut It All Down youth movement, which has taken to the streets on peaceful protests to demand the end of gender-based violence. On 25th November, during International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women, I handed over to the UN and the AU the Africa Young Manifesto on Beijing Plus 25, where over 1,500 young Africans demand the end of gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is also a matter of peace and security. 4, and finally, the declaration urges for the protection of fundamental youth rights and freedoms. The freedom for protest, for internet, for speech, for civic space in Nigeria, in Cameroon, in Guinea, and across the continent. It is important in the 5-year anniversary of 2250 resolution that we are all reminded that protection of young people in compliance with international humanitarian and human rights law is one of its 5 pillars. Young Africans demand the protection of their rights and accountability during armed conflict, because young Africans do not produce, sell, or buy guns, and yet they pay the highest price, their lives and their livelihoods. As Mandela Kapere, a young Pan-African leader, sadly taken from us by COVID-19 this week, said, "We are a generation of paradox, the generation of the middle, a generation of the intersection between the past and the new, representing both the heroic struggles of the past and the hopeful lamenting for a better future." He was talking about the millennials and the responsibility of all of us to co-lead the future he hoped for. By our actions, we can honor his memory and all of those taken by COVID-19 in the most dignified way. I thank you.
I want to thank Ms. Arria-Chebi, the African Union Envoy on Youth. This live broadcast of Security Council Arria-Formula now crosses to Ramallah in Palestine, and I want to invite Mr. Ahmed Yassin, Palestinian Vision. Ahmed, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. Your Excellencies and dear fellow young people, I'm grateful to be invited to speak to the Security Council today. I do not claim to be able to speak on behalf of millions of Palestinian youth who dream and strive for a better world for themselves, their people, the region, and the world. How to convey to you what it means to be another besieged and targeted Palestinian generation, with thousands of Palestinian youth being killed, displaced, arrested, or permanently disabled. I can only convey what they expect from you. They do not lack potential nor determination. What they need is to be able to live in freedom and dignity on their land so they can fully unleash their potential. My name is Ahmed Yassin, I'm 29, and I'm dedicated to working towards developing and sustaining my community to achieve peace, opportunities, and a brighter future. I, together with my generation, did not have the advantage of living in peace. Every day, I'm afraid that something will happen to me or to those I love or work so hard to empower. In the spring of 2002, I witnessed an armed clash, followed by a curfew in my city, Ramallah. My family and I truly feared for our lives. This incident made me think about the meaning of peace, security, and life. I decided to dedicate my time and energy to change the situation as much as I possibly can. I live in a place of turmoil where safety for youth and others hardly exists. However, and despite what became a normal yet dangerous life, my peers and I decided to act towards positive change. The change that youth who constitute 30% of my community dreams of. Create opportunities, advocate for human rights, peace, and security, and to also be role models for other youth and segments in the community and the region. I'm proud to say that I've worked with more than 1,000 youth in different areas in the West Bank, Jerusalem, and beyond, focusing on increasing the capacity of youth, particularly those in marginalized communities, in social, economic, and political skills, providing youth with trainings in negotiation skills, public speaking, and diplomacy. We've also assisted in distributing humanitarian assistances to communities affected by the conflict in Jerusalem, the Jordan Valley, and elsewhere. We have also designed programs and projects that allow youth to discuss their fears, their dreams, and how they envision a better tomorrow. There are those who think that despair will lead to surrender and submission. They believe in walls and blockades. That is a dangerous bet. Fostering hope, recognizing Palestinian rights, and that Palestinian lives matter is the only path to peace. My belief in youth and people is very strong. Peace is the language of the strong, the language of the noble. We are a nation with pride and with a noble cause. Therefore, we don't fear peace, we seek it. Despite the tremendous amount of fear we're living in, youth in my country are working towards justice, freedom, and peace because they want to contribute to a brighter future. Your Excellencies, requires wisdom and mental strength, but it also requires solidarity. I am today, as a Palestinian youth, speaking to you with pride and strength that we are ready more than any time before to create the peace and the change we are seeking for. A change that will guarantee our safety, dignity, national and individual civil and human rights. However, to achieve this change, I humbly request your solidarity with my young peers to support our youth politically and economically and provide them with the protection they are entitled to prioritize our cause for freedom and peace on your agenda. Believe in us as world leaders and decision makers to bring about this change. The conflict that surrounds us has gone on for far too long, as young people born into this do not deserve to live in fear. So invest and partner with us based on the 5 pillars of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250. So that my generation is the first generation to usher in an era of peace and stability in our region. Allow me to conclude by saying that the young people of my country, the region, and the world deserve to live in peace and deserve to seek better opportunities. It is my pride that you've listened to me today. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all.
We thank Ahmed Yassin of Palestinian Vision for his statement. We now cross back to Africa and give the floor to Ms. Karabo Mokhonyan, Southern Africa Youth Ambassador for Peace. Karabo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Machila. The President and members of the UN Security Council, member states, UN agencies, youth envoys, distinguished guests, and my fellow youth, I'm honored to be given this opportunity to brief the Council and join in on the celebration of Resolution 2250 on youth, peace, and security. In doing so, we need to also celebrate all the incredible peace efforts that young people have taken on at community level and the resilience that we have shown in the past 5 years. The young people in Nigeria who led the End SARS movement against police brutality, youth activists in Colombia and Zimbabwe who continue to fight against the peace and economic crisis, the youth-led anti-gender-based violence and female homicide movements in Namibia and South Africa, and not to forget the young heroes who led community interventions in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. As young people, we no longer need to prove that we have the capacity to bring social change within our communities. and influence institutional decision-making. We are currently doing it, and we will continue to show great resilience in advocating for peace and security. Resolution 2250 has prompted foundational institutional support of peace-building work by young people, like the African Union, which has launched the Youth for Peace Africa program and adopted the Continental Framework on Youth, Peace and Security, making it possible for young Africans to take part in the Silencing the Guns in Africa agenda. Resolution 2250 has also given young people like myself the confidence and agency to engage in peace and security issues that directly affect our communities, and has made it possible to influence decision-making. On the ground, we are initiating intergenerational dialogues with decision makers, forming transformative youth-led social movements, mobilizing other youth through the formation of youth peace networks, and implementing peace initiatives. This is something to be proud of, and Resolution 2250 made that possible for us young people. We spent the last 5 years having conversations about what the role of young people is. We need to start having new conversations about how we can sustain existing youth efforts by fostering long-term partnerships, integrating more youth in decision-making at all levels, and looking to maximize active youth participation in peace building at grassroots level. This requires greater investment in youth-led work, a willingness to view youth as partners in advancing the peace and security agenda, and for us young people who have access to pave the way for more young people to advance peace and security in their communities. There are 4 key opportunities to advance youth peace and security for the next coming years. Firstly, the United Nations, together with regional organizations, need to work together to increase efforts to encourage and support member states to promote and domesticate the youth peace and security agenda at a national level. This can be achieved by capitalizing on national youth policies or developing national action plans with implementation plans. This will create local ownership of frameworks, enable the formation of bilateral relationships between stakeholders and youth peace builders for reflection and exchange of ideas, and result in effective implementation of the youth peace and security agenda at community level. Secondly, we need to work to dismantle structural exclusions that make it challenging for young people to integrate into formal development spaces. These range from narratives that youth are disruptive and not progressive. To dismantle these structural exclusions, we need to have more intergenerational conversations that result in commitments from both sides. The development of pro-youth policies at community level, have effective youth representation in institutions, formalize youth work and not always subjected to volunteerism or affiliations, and drive reverse capacity building with existing leaders on how they can work with young people. Thirdly, maximizing active youth participation requires us to leave nobody behind. The visible emergence of individual peace builders, informal peace movements, and grassroots initiatives has revealed to us that there is a spectrum of youth peace builders that fall short of investment and resources. Resources like funding, capacity building, and technical support should not only be extended to formal youth peace networks, but we need to also extend these to valuable informal grassroots youth-led peace efforts that work to maintain peace and security within our communities. Like a young man by the name of Joseph from the Democratic Republic of Congo, who implements an informal rehabilitation program to discourage young men in his community from joining violent extremist groups. Young people like Joseph deserve to be invested in and not excluded because of the informality of their initiatives. Leaving nobody behind also requires us to ensure that in programming and investment, there's effective representation of vulnerable and key populations like young women, people of color, persons living with disability, and minorities. Fourthly, there's a gap in research, coverage, and data collection to report on the peace efforts of young people at a community level. Young people are leading incredible peace efforts to ensure peaceful societies that are free from insecurity. The success of Resolution 2250 and any other framework that supports youth peace and security requires effective monitoring at a national and local level of youth-led peace efforts, challenges young people face, best practices that can be taken forward, and success stories about the things we are doing on the ground. Thank you so much for creating this platform for us youth to engage on an intergenerational level. Young people on the ground are willing and capable to drive the youth peace and security agenda beyond that which has been done for the past 5 years. Let us partner in realizing the effective implementation of Resolution 2215. Thank you so much, Ambassador Machila and Excellencies. I conclude my statement.
I want to thank Ms. Karabo Mokhonyana, Southern Africa Youth Ambassador for Peace, based in Johannesburg, South Africa. The co-hosts of this Security Council Arria-Formula request all those who have just joined us to please continue muting your mics. This is still a live broadcast on Twitter, YouTube, worldwide. Now I'm going to give opportunity to the co-hosts of this Arria-Formula to make their statements. I will speak as a South African representative and a co-host. Again, I wish to thank the briefers for the insightful briefing. It is always encouraging to hear from young people and listen to their perspective and contribution in the peace and security agenda. Today marks the 5th year anniversary of that landmark historic Resolution 2250 you all referred to, of 2015, which recognized the important role youth can play in advancing the maintenance of internal peace and security. That historic Resolution 2250 paved the way for youth peace builders to assert their voices and positively contribute to preventing conflict and contributing towards peace processes globally. In this regard, South Africa welcomes the role that the youth play in peace building and sustaining peace as envisaged in Resolution 2250. South Africa supports the meaningful participation and representation of young people at all levels of policy formulation, implementation, and monitoring of the peace and security decisions and agreements as envisioned in Resolution 2250, as well as its subsequent Resolution 2419 of 2018 and 2535 of 2020. South Africa views the youth as agent of peace and a resource that needs to be used efficiently and strategically. These young women and men have talents that are vast and diverse. They are striving for peace, justice, inclusion, gender equality, and human rights. For South Africa, intergenerational dialogue is one of the fundamental ways to lay the foundation for sustained peace initiatives. During our presidency in October 2020, South Africa, together with council members who will be speaking later on, prioritized the role of youth in the pursuit of peace and security, with a specific focus on silencing the guns in Africa. Subsequently, the Security Council adopted Presidential Statement S/PRST/2019/15, which reaffirmed support for the role that the youth must play in the realization of Africa's aspiration to end conflict, and further reinforce the important role that regional and sub-regional organizations play in the promotion of conflict prevention and peace building. We remain guided by the African Union Continental Framework on Youth, Peace and Security, and a 10-year implementation plan for Continental Framework, advocating for greater participation of youth in peace processes and implementation of the priorities of Resolution 2250. In this context, we believe that mainstreaming and institutionalization of these frameworks in the African continent will advance the implementation of youth, peace, and security agenda in conflict situations. We are pleased that there has been some progress achieved in advancing the representation and inclusive participation of youth in peace processes. However, we acknowledged there is still much work to be done to ensure further progress to implement the key pillars of YP's resolution. Saruka believes that intergenerational dialogue, coupled with coherent coordination and cooperation, could be utilized to optimize the effort of youth network and national youth efforts in peace building and addressing the gaps that exist in the full implementation of youth, peace, and security agenda. For that to happen, it is important to foster trust between decision makers and the youth. This can further be achieved through several ways, including the promotion of meaningful engagement of the youth and ensuring that their voices are heard in their contribution to conflict prevention, peacemaking, peace building, including through peace agreement. We remain convinced that in order to further the implementation of Resolution 2250 and its subsequent resolution, and to encourage the participation of youth in peace and security processes, UN member states, the Security Council, regional organizations, and civil society groups should do the following. Firstly, recognize the force of young peace builders as agents of peace and their positive role and contribution in establishing peace and stability in conflict zones. Secondly, support greater funding for the youth groups and youth-led initiative at local level through supportive youth peace builders network and fostering local youth leadership. Thirdly, continue to build evidence around young people's contribution to peace building in diverse conflict contexts. And fourth, support the establishment of intergenerational dialogue platforms to discuss challenges relating to youth inclusion in peace building and policy processes. In conclusion, I would like to underscore the importance of bringing about a pragmatic shift in the concept of the role of youth in conflict, which transform them from being victims or agents of violence to being agents of change and peace building. It is our firm belief that in this process, the generational dialogue are one of the avenues that could be utilized to bolster dialogue between the different generations that allow for participants to speak with one another than above one another, with a common purpose to achieve peace and stability. I thank you. Now, I want to give the floor to another co-host, Tunisia.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much. At the outset, I thank the young briefers for their insightful briefings, and I would like to stress the importance of this meeting, which marks the 5th anniversary of Resolution 2250 on youth, peace, and security, with the specific topic capitalizing on intergenerational dialogue to build and sustain peace and enhance social cohesion at community levels. This celebration is of particular importance within the current pandemic crisis, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic represents a cross-cutting major challenge with serious implications affecting, among others, the youth, peace, and security, and thus requiring our full attention. Mr. Chair, young people represent a large segment of the world population affected by armed conflicts. They also make a large part of the refugees and displaced persons worldwide, especially in Africa, with limited access to education and economic opportunities. Moreover, and despite the international focus and global efforts, youth are still left for themselves in many contexts, and yet considered in countries affected by conflicts as perpetrators or victims. It is imperative to overcome this stereotyped narrow view and intensify our common action towards increasing youth inclusion in developmental initiatives providing more economic opportunities and enhancing their participation in the political decision-making. The focus should be thus put on creating an enabling environment for young people to get the right skills, access to information, have the opportunity to participate in the public and private spheres, along with the continuous efforts to pursue maximum employment. In the same vein, and in the line with YPS agenda, we believe that it is important to increase meaningful and inclusive participation of youth in silencing the guns and peace-building efforts, including through developing policies that would enhance their capabilities and ensure that their contribution is recognized and adequately supported. The role of youth as peace builders and leaders in sustaining peace is indeed of great value, especially through fostering dialogue, mediation, and enhancing social cohesion. In this context, we should recognize the importance of the UN Youth Strategy that aims to scale up global, regional, and national actions to meet young people's needs, realize their rights, and tap their possibilities as agents of positive change. It should be noted, however, that there is still a disproportionate focus on young people in connection to violent extremism and terrorism, which dismiss the positive and constructive work young people are undertaking in their local contexts. Mr. Chair, Tunisia has always put youth at the top of its priorities. It is stipulated in its constitution. Youth are an active force in building the nation and underscore that the state seeks to provide the necessary conditions for developing the capacities of youth and realizing their potential, support them to assume responsibility, and strives to extend and generalize their participation in social, economic, cultural, and political development. We firmly believe that young people play a vital role in the development of their societies. This role is a multi-dimensional one, in which the political, the economic, the social, and the cultural interact harmoniously and inclusively. This is the spirit that drives our political philosophy and our approach to this theme. In closing, I would like to reiterate our steadfast commitment to the promotion of youth role and participation in shaping the present and future of our region and in achieving the aspirations of our populations to peace, security, dignity, and prosperity. We reiterate our engagement in implementing the YPS agenda with its key pillars of protection, prevention, participation, partnership, and reintegration. Young people have a significant role to play and are at the core of our ambitious actions towards peaceful, prosperous, and inclusive societies. This is, in our opinion, the right message to send on the occasion of the 5th anniversary of Resolution 2250. Thank you.
I want to thank the permanent representative of Tunisia for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of St. Vincent and Grenadines.
Thank you, Ambassador Jerry. Good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is pleased to join other member states in co-sponsoring this event. Indeed, the plans and policies of our government recognize and mobilize youth leadership at all levels, including our formal political structures and at the level of community organizing. But there's much more to be done nationally, regionally, and globally to ensure that young people always have a seat at the table. It is undeniable that young people must occupy the vanguard of social transformation for sustainable peace and development in conflict-affected countries and regions. 5 years after the adoption of Resolution 2250, at a time when the COVID-19 pandemic has further eroded the security situation in several regions of the world, young people are actively engaged in building and sustaining peace at the local, national, regional, and global levels. We recognize the vision and leadership of our youth briefers and take this opportunity to endorse actions which accelerate the implementation of all Security Council commitments on youth, peace, and security. UN Youth Advisor for Somalia, Jao Scapellini, reminded us in September that young people are challenging the United Nations and its partners to go beyond ad hoc initiatives and to establish mechanisms of participation that would create a permanent platform for dialogue. All SPMs and PKOs must establish youth and gender focal points, policies, and plans that work alongside national and regional youth and gender machineries at all stages of the conflict cycle: conflict prevention, peacekeeping, and peace building and sustaining peace. Young people must also be actively consulted as contributors and beneficiaries of all efforts to consolidate peace, such as security sector reform and disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration programs. We welcome the AU's 10-year implementation plan for the Continental Framework on Youth, Peace, and Security, to which Aya Chebi referred earlier, which provides an important roadmap for concrete action at the national and regional levels across the 5 key pillars. This framework builds on Africa's vision of its youth, as outlined in the African Youth Charter and as captured in Silencing the Guns in Africa and its Agenda 2063. We endorse youth-led national, cross-regional, intergenerational exchanges and dialogues on progress and challenges with the support of YPS mechanisms within the United Nations. Intergenerational, gender-just, geographically and racially diverse co-leadership of national, regional, and cross-regional dialogue and decision-making must become standard operational practice. It means the meaningful participation of young women and displaced and refugee youth in formal national, regional, and UN-led actions for building and sustaining peace. As a council, we cannot be satisfied that youth civil society continue to support their communities in spite of threats of violence and against our shortcomings in mainstreaming actions to accelerate the full implementation of the YPS agenda. Young people are among the most gravely affected by protracted conflicts globally. They would also unjustly and inevitably bear the future burdens of climate change and ecological destruction. Yet, they emerge as leaders in building and sustaining peace, too often having to insert themselves into formal processes. Celebrating the essential contribution of Somali, Haitian, Afghan, Colombian, and Sahelian, and other youth in conflict-affected countries and regions is not enough. We must commit to accelerated actions with youth to operationalize and enhance the existing YPS normative framework. Let us be reminded that the future we all want and that which our young people rightfully deserve can only be attained through multilateral solutions that cater to the needs, interests, and priorities of all in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. I thank you.
I want to thank Halema, the Deputy Permanent Representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, for her statement. I'd like to remind the listeners and viewers around the world that this is a live broadcast of the Security Council Arria-Formula on youth, peace, and security. I now give the floor to of Niger, and again remind all of you that, like St. Vincent Grenadines, Tunisia, South Africa, Niger, Security Council in the formation called A3+1. Niger, you have the floor. Niger, can you unmute? Can you unmute? Sure, yeah, we can hear you now. No, you're mute, unmute. Unmute your mic. Unmute. I think listeners and viewers, we apologize for this short interruption. So I will give the floor to France, and I'll bring in Niger. Niger,
okay.
can hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Ambassador Jerry, for the floor, and apologies for the technical difficulty, Mr. President. Let me begin by thanking the Permanent Mission of South Africa and all co-organizers for this important discussion. I also would like to thank all the briefers, all of whom showed us that young people are not only the future, but we are also the present. We are here today to speak about intergenerational leadership, the notion of which we know is deeply embedded in many of our cultures. Community dialogues used to bring together young and old, women and men, under the timeless palaver tree as a space where public deliberations happened, disputes get settled, and unity fostered. As our societies underwent fundamental transitions, such unique spaces slowly disappeared, especially in urban spaces, leaving a vacuum in the spaces that allowed for intergenerational dialogues. We must recreate and consolidate these types of priceless formal and informal platforms. They will not only ensure greater social cohesion, but in the process could sustain peace and perhaps even prevent the onset of tensions within communities. Important initiatives such as the African Women Leaders Network greatly contribute to consolidating new Pan-African spaces. Here too at the UN, there's need for more intergenerational dialogue, and we could reflect on how to create such networks. Mr. President, Africa, our continent, is the youngest in the world. It is also the fastest growing population worldwide. This is an unprecedented opportunity, but it also presents our African countries with a difficult task to create the conditions for a secure future in an interconnected world, a world which we know presents us with unforeseen crises such as the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. We can face them. Unlocking the potential of the millions of African youth, as Aya has mentioned, would be a game changer for Africa and for the world. But it is also, as many studies have shown, a sure way of preventing conflicts. As African countries have committed to silencing the guns, the YPS agenda will therefore be crucial in the process. My delegation firmly supports the strengthening of the YPS agenda and its mainstreaming in domestic legislation. By involving young people, we tackle the structural barriers to youth representation in the political processes, and we also begin to reverse the poor presence of young people in decision-making bodies. In Niger, for example, the Youth Parliament and the Youth National Council are two platforms that successfully ensured that the voices of young people are heard at the highest level of decision-making. Such initiatives could be emulated in other contexts. In Niger, we also recognize the necessity of disengagement and reintegration, one of the pillars of the Resolution 2250. And since 2017, over nearly 300 ex-combatants of the terrorist organizations Boko Haram, who had voluntarily surrendered to authorities, joined the reintegration center in the region of Difa. Through this center and the humane treatment that young people receive, Niger intends to send a strong signal to encourage young people to lay down arms and to lead a constructive life. It is also a signal to show that even young people who have undergone some of the most challenging situations can be agents of change. Mr. President, it is no secret that young people, particularly young women, play a critical role in peace processes. Studies have shown that. Therefore, my delegation reiterates the need to continue to protect and strengthen the full participation of young women and men. this must go hand in hand with a greater protection of the civic space, especially for young women peace builders and women human rights defenders who face reprisals because of their work, which in essence makes our work more effective. We know, however, that challenges remain in ensuring the full and effective implementation of the YPS agenda. To this effect, I conclude with a few key recommendations. First, we really do need to mainstream the YPS agenda in our work on conflict prevention, including in tackling new threats. Young people are already at the forefront of fighting for climate justice. There are so many working at various levels to bring change, consciousness, and action. We have to listen more to young people within institutions and meaningfully involve young people from the onset. We can do so by ensuring that all new developing agencies, including in the new UN AU framework, meaningfully involve young people. Second, my delegation calls for increased funding and technical support for the vital work of young people, especially young women working in conflict areas. Third, as the Youth Envoy has stated last year in July, we must support this designation of youth focal points in each peacekeeping missions to ensure and consolidate the participation of young people in peace processes. And lastly, the call for more data on what, where, and how young people are contributing to peace and security would be critical. We echo to this effect Ms. Karabo's call for more data, collecting in a more systematic manner on youth efforts in peace building. We do call on member states to set up instances that allow for the systematic participation of young people in various national, regional, and international decisions making. Mr. President, to conclude, at a time where the world is facing a common enemy and global pandemic, we are reminded of the importance of partnerships. We welcome to this effect the institutionalization of the YPS agenda in the African Union in its Peace and Security Council since 2018. This has created a unique platform for reinforcing the role of African youth in its AU initiative, Silencing the Gun. It is time to go, as Aya has noted, from dialogue to having intergenerational co-leadership. I thank you for your attention.
I thank Halima from Niger, speaking after Halima from St. Vincent and Grenadines. Now, Karabo, you have to research the link between Halima in Niger and Halima in diaspora in St. Vincent and Grenadines. And I want to give the floor to the representative of France. Permanent Security Council. This is the P5. These are heavyweights now. Nicolas.
Thank you, Chair. I would first like to thank South Africa for organizing this meeting and all the speakers that are participating to this session as well. I would like to seize this opportunity to pay tribute to all young activists and human rights defenders around the world. As we celebrate the 5th anniversary of the adoption of Landmark Resolution 2250, we must take stock of the progress made and of the long road ahead of us. We must remain mobilized, guarantee a central place for youth, and to fully grasp their immense potential for establishing and maintaining international peace and security and building just, peaceful, and inclusive societies. In this regard, the unanimous adoption of Resolution 2535 last July on youth, peace, and security, facilitated by the Dominican Republic and France, was an important step. It highlighted the Security Council's strong support for the effective and meaningful participation of youth in peace and security. France called for the collective, integrated, and coordinated implementation of Resolution 2535, along with previous resolutions on youth, peace, and security, that is the utmost responsibility of the members of the Security Council, but also of the United Nations as a whole. I would like to underline today the importance of respecting the fundamental rights of youth to enable them to fully express their potential. In this regard, Resolution 2535 marked a significant step forward by strengthening the human rights protection framework, as well as the protection of the civic and political space. Young people continue to be stigmatized and seen as troublemakers or ground for violent extremism in certain contexts. These stereotypes are too often used as pretexts to ignore the demands and to violate their rights. France will continue to hold for the respect of freedom of expression and the right to peaceful assembly everywhere and for everyone, in particular by supporting young human rights defenders. I can also assure you that France will continue to be engaged in ensuring that young people, including young women, are associated with in our work at the United Nations. Young people today have shown us that they are ready to be part of the discussion on major global issues. We see it every day in their mobilization against climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic. We must now fully support their involvement in the discussions and decisions-making processes. France also commends the work of the Office of the African Union Youth Envoy, in particular the organization of the Fellowship on Silencing the Gun last month, to equip young women with a comprehensive training on peace and security. Finally, France will also put youth at the heart of the Equality Generation Forum, organized jointly with Mexico and UN Women, which will take place in 2021. We believe youth participation will be fundamental. This will allow them to participate meaningfully in the discussions. Their voices will be heard. You can count on France's support and determination. I thank you very much, Mr. President.
I want to thank the Permanent Representative for France, Nicolas, for his statement. I now give the floor to the Representative of the Dominican Republic. Jose, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. As others have reminded us, today marks the 5th anniversary of the adoption of groundbreaking Security Council Resolution 2250. Spearheaded by Jordan, it was the first time youth was recognized formally as a positive contributor to peace building and conflict resolutions. I want to thank South Africa for its leadership in organizing this meeting, which we are honored to co-sponsor, and the briefers for their valuable contributions. Colleagues, in too many occasions, young people's efforts and voices continue to be ignored, undervalued, and subject to structural barriers. But also, the violation of their human rights and insufficient efforts to ensure their participation in decision-making have been detrimental factors that need to be completely eradicated. Yet, despite these challenges, exacerbated today by the pandemic, young people offer tremendous opportunities in the creation of more peaceful and inclusive societies. As a response, in the 5 years since Resolution 2250, attention has quickly grown on the implementation of the YPS agenda. Just last July, Resolution 2535, laid by France and the Dominican Republic, substantively increased the pace by focusing on operationalizing youth inclusive peace and security efforts. Now is the time to harness young people's leadership in the maintenance of peace and security, and to ensure that their meaningful and full participation ceases to be just rhetoric. Let's leverage the outstanding support provided by Resolutions 2250, 2419, and 2535 to young peace builders and take this opportunity to celebrate the incredible contributions of youth organizations across the globe. From young people using their social media power and influence to become observers of the South Sudan High-Level Revitalization Forum, to young leaders in Colombia playing a critical role throughout the peace process. Young people have the indisputable potential to create change and to boost implementation at the local, regional, and international levels. So is the case of their role in the adoption of the African Union's continental framework on youth, peace, and security, and the European Union's continuous commitment to youth participation. Since 2015, we have constantly witnessed structural change in many shapes and forms. But what have we learned? Where do we go from here? Well, here are some points we deem necessary as we move forward. First, increase meaningful partnerships between young people, civil society, states, and this council on the implementation of the YPS agenda. Second, continue support for the meaningful and full participation of young people. And third, development of national action plans and roadmaps by member states. Then we can also facilitate an inclusive, safe, enabling, gender-responsive environment for young people, including the protection of their civic space. Also, we can increase funding for the implementation of the agenda, including accessible resourcing for youth in organizations. We can also ensure capacity building, including the designation of youth focal points at UN peace missions. Also, with the relevant focus on this meeting in mind, capitalizing on the intergenerational dialogue, information sharing, networking, and joint advocacy between young people, governments, and the UN system is paramount. We can also invite more young people to brief the Security Council, not just on issues pertaining to youth directly, but on all matters, including country-specific discussions. This is the practice taken by Dominican Republic and its membership, and we hope it continues. Therefore, the full implementation of Resolution 2535 is crucial. Besides cementing the YPS agenda in the Security Council, it seeks to operationalize these commitments. As the Dominican Republic exits this council as a member this month, we reiterate our commitment to continue working with and for youth at the heart of peace and security from wherever we stand. I thank you.
I want to thank Jose, the permanent representative of the Dominican Republic in the Security Council, and together with France, thank you very much for Resolution 2523 on this agenda. And I want to give the floor to the representative of Ireland, the incoming Members of the Council 2021-2022. Ireland.
Thank you, Ambassador, and our thanks to you and to the Mission of South Africa for convening this very important meeting today. I also want to say a word of appreciation to our young briefers for their inspiring words and, of course, for their leadership as well. Today, we celebrate the 5th anniversary of the adoption of the groundbreaking Resolution 2250 on youth, peace and security. But 2020 also saw the adoption of Resolution 2535, as others have mentioned, which Ireland was very proud to co-sponsor, a clear and welcome recognition in that resolution by the Security Council of the centrality of youth to all aspects of the sustaining peace agenda. While it's important to acknowledge these achievements, we must push for even greater progress. We need to do more to ensure the empowerment and inclusion of young people and the amplification of their voices. Ireland is proud to champion both youth peace and security and women peace and security, two agendas with important synergies, not only with each other, but also with the broader sustaining peace agenda. And in saying this, I draw from Ireland's own experience of the complex process of achieving and supporting peace on our own island. During the Northern Ireland peace process, the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition fought for their right to be at the negotiating table and ensured that the resulting peace agreement contained language on reconciliation and integrated schooling, recognising that it's young people who carry the torch of peace into the future. Ireland's third National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security recognises the importance of building youth voices and commits to supporting youth engagement and the empowerment of young women and girls in particular. It also underlines as well the value of intergenerational dialogue, not simply so that older generations can share their wisdom or indeed their mistakes, but to enable youth to inspire and participate in the collaborative work of building a better future. Ireland understands that young people's active contribution to building and sustaining peace can be enhanced when policymakers recognise that young people matter. Their participation is critical to the achievement of Agenda 2030 and its Sustainable Development Goals. It's also vital for the promotion of human rights and wider peace and security agendas. Climate change is a key driver of conflict, as we know, contributing to food insecurity, water scarcity, and undermining as well our ability to prosper and live in harmony with nature and with each other. This is apparent to young people the world over, and they're demanding action and calling on leaders to lead in addressing this crisis. We must listen and we must act. As an incoming Security Council member, Ireland is committed to giving young people the opportunity to speak on the issues that will affect them. That's why we were pleased to co-sponsor today's meeting and also to involve Ireland's UN youth delegates in the preparation of this statement today. I want to conclude with the words of one of Ireland's most celebrated contemporary poets, Evan Boland. Reflecting on the centenary of women's suffrage in Ireland and on the intergenerational impact of our actions, she wrote, "Our future will become the past of other women." What better legacy can there be than to ensure that the youth of today have genuine agency in building a more peaceful future for the coming generations? I thank you, President.
I thank Jim, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Ireland, for the statement. I now want to give the floor to the representative of Kenya, one of the last co-hosts, Kenya.
Thank you, Chair. It's a privilege to join you this afternoon. And this afternoon, the voices of the diverse group of distinguished youth representatives have further demonstrated that they and their fellow youth are powerful agents of positive change when it comes to sustaining peace and social cohesion. The Kenya delegation commends the Republic of South Africa, a new ambassador as the organizers of this Arria-Formula meeting, which we have the honor to co-host alongside all the other sponsors for this action, which prioritizes the youth, peace, and security agenda during your presidency. As an incoming member to the Council, YPS is one of our priorities. His Excellency President Kenyatta has, in his capacity as the UNICEF Global Champion for Youth Empowerment, continued to advance his commitment to empowering and enabling youth, reflecting a position that he has taken in Kenya, where we have embraced our young people as our future and as those who will drive our nation to heights we have yet to climb to. As we celebrate the YPS's 5th anniversary this December, allow me to highlight 6 points informed by the guiding questions. Number 1 is localization of YPS resolutions and initiatives, which we believe are critical in order to make the recommendations relevant, contextual, and accessible at the grassroots level. At the end of the day, Chair, we must have solutions that touch people at the grassroots. Number 2 is creation of space for the youth and having meaningful partnerships with young people. And by that, we mean that leadership and elected officials, elected leaders and official government institutions should include youth in the formulation of national peace-building strategies and initiatives. Number 3 is that all national, regional, and international stakeholders should ensure that the 5 pillars of action embodied in 2250, namely participation, partnerships, prevention, protection, disengagement, and reintegration, are implemented comprehensively. The Council should continue seeking advice from regional bodies like the African Union and other subsidiary bodies such as the Peacebuilding Commission on how the potential of youth has been and can further be positively harnessed in fragile and conflict-affected countries. Number 4 is we need strategic investment in youth as a preventive measure. That means national budgets should include such investments that allows for translation of national policies pertaining to youth into practical initiatives and effective operationalization of youth-led projects. A core matter our generation, our country seeks to advance in all spheres is the importance of expanding youth employment and opportunity as key to humanity's prosperity. We must at all stages ensure that youth voices for peace are supported by economies that are youth and entrepreneurship responsive. That is in terms of national policy, embracing the youth as a core constituency. Finally, on the 6th, it is incumbent upon us to ensure that our youth are protected, particularly against recruitment by terrorist groups and exploitation by cynical political actors who seek to benefit from division. I will finish with President Kenyatta's quote, who has put it, and I quote him, "Let us not incite the youth, let us instead include the youth." Chair, that is a spirit and the approach that Kenya brings, and we shall continue to pursue this important agenda going forward in the General Assembly and in the Security Council. I thank you.
I want to thank Martin, the newly arrived Kenya permanent representative to the United Nations. And Kenya is the incoming Member of the Council 2021-2022. That was the last of the co-host. Again, we'd like to remind those who have joined and listeners around the world that this is a live broadcast of the Security Council Arria-Formula on Youth, Peace and Security. Colleagues were accompanied by over 871 people on Twitter and 209 on Facebook, all live. So let's continue muting our mics so that we can have a nice audible broadcast around the world. Now I'm going to give the floor for Security Council members to deliver their statement. I want to give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. The UK would like to thank the organisers, South Africa, and the co-hosts of this important discussion today. Inclusion is critical to building sustainable peace, so we very much welcome the focus of today's event. And it is clear from our excellent briefers that this agenda still needs championing. But in the implementation of UN Security Council resolutions 2250, 2419 and 2535, more needs to be done to move from rhetoric to action, focusing on youth's agency in building peace. Young people are key stakeholders in every sphere of life, from driving political change and defending and promoting human rights to economic development and peace building. Young peace builders, for example, are often best placed to break the cycle of violence that affects local communities. And yet, too often, the focus is on youth as instigators or perpetrators of violence, and their voices are sidelined in decision-making and peace-building efforts. Today, youth are also challenging stereotypes that exclude them from the table. The power of intergenerational dialogues, therefore, in sharing lessons learned and best practice on how to overcome challenges cannot be understated. That is why the UK is working to ensure youth peace and security issues are not siloed, but are fully integrated and mainstreamed across the full spectrum of our work, from education and peace building to human rights and security. ensuring the meaningful participation of youth, women and marginalised groups in political peace-building processes is critical. Just a couple of examples of our recent efforts. In October, the UK co-hosted an event on rethinking inclusive peace processes with Mexico, Norway and Kenya. Women peace builders, 3 of whom were youth, shared their ideas to build more creative inclusive peace processes to address the insufficient participation of women and young people. The event built upon the complementary aims of youth and women peace and security agendas to drive collective progress. And secondly, Chair, the global COVID-19 response must also put youth at the centre. So another example of our efforts is in November, the UK, in partnership with the African Union Office of the Youth Envoy and Wilton Park, hosted a virtual policy dialogue series which developed proposals for action from African governments, institutions and development partners, informed by the experiences and aspirations of young people. By fostering institutional partnerships, the international community can help young people recover better from the impact of COVID-19. To conclude, Chair, as Ms. Chebi so eloquently outlined today, intergenerational dialogues unite the experience, wisdom and skills of different people and generations. They empower all members of the community to engage in conflict prevention and resolution, to listen and to learn from each other and accept each other's differences, thus making communities more resilient to conflict and more efficient at identifying problems and their solutions. The UK will continue to work to make this a reality. Thank you.
I want to thank Alice, representing United Kingdom. And I will give the floor to the Representative of China.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Jerry.
Colleagues, can we mute our mics, participants? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador, for organizing this Arria meeting. We appreciate this initiative to have this Arria meeting, and we thank delegation of South Africa and other co-hosts for their efforts. I would like to also thank all the briefers for their insights and information. Young people play an important role in promoting international peace, security, and sustainable development. Meanwhile, a large number of young people across the globe are still suffering from armed conflicts, poverty and hunger, terrorism and extremism, lack of education, and unemployment. Resolution 2250 identifies 5 key pillars for action: participation, protection, prevention, partnership, and disengagement and reintegration. The 5 pillars remain relevant and serve well as our guidelines. The international community should increase investment in youth and fully implement Security Council resolutions on YPS. Exchanges and coordination on YPS agenda should be enhanced across UN system and between UN and regional organizations to achieve synergy. China encourages the Office of the SG's Envoy on Youth to play a bigger role in this regard. We support the AU efforts in implementing the YPS agenda to promote the peace and security in the African continent. In implementing YPS resolutions, member states must address issues of marginalization and social exclusion and protect youth from extremism and terrorism incitement. The international community should make youth a key driver in the implementation of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and promote peace through development. The 2030 Agenda addresses the root causes of conflicts and is a cornerstone for long-term conflict prevention. Investing in young people and improving inclusiveness is key to the 2030 Agenda commitment. We call on member states to effectively implement the 2030 Agenda with a focus on poverty eradication and do their utmost in terms of education and vocational training for young people. In the context of COVID-19 pandemic, we must take concrete measures to address its impact on education, employment, and accessibility of health service for youth. We also count on young people to join the pandemic response, help the most vulnerable, and contribute to economic and social recovery. China has been actively engaged in YPS agenda. We carry out youth exchanges and cooperation with many countries and international organizations, including the African Union, the Arab League, and the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States. Together, we launched multiple projects, providing scholarships and professional trainings to promote youth innovation and entrepreneurship. It is China's sincere hope that with joint efforts, we can shape a brighter future for all, especially our younger generations. Thank you.
I want to thank Xiao Jun, the Deputy Permanent Representative of China, for his statement. And I want to give the floor to the President of Belgium.
Thank you so much, Mr. President and dear Jerry, for giving me the floor and for organizing this meeting. As many colleagues have been referring to, it has been 5 years now that the resolution 2250 was adopted, and Belgium welcomes the opportunity to take stock of progress made and opportunities for improvement, in particular in view of the multidimensional challenges faced by the young generation of today, such as climate change, global health crisis, mass displacement, and the emergence of new technologies. I would like to outline 5 points that could help us implement our commitments. First, we can start by increasing the number of young people in peace processes and processes of post-conflict reconstruction, enhancing social cohesion at community levels, as mentioned in the title of this meeting, should be based on real opportunities for youth in terms of socio-economic integration. That is why Belgium supports different projects in Africa in the field of technical and vocational education, as well as economic empowerment of young girls. We welcome the sustained attention to the Women, Peace and Security agenda by the Security Council, as well as the Peace Building Fund's increased focus on empowering women and youth. Belgium also encourages the incoming members to keep inviting young people to brief the Security Council. Secondly, we should encourage member states to create dialogues between politicians and young people through youth parliaments, as well as by putting young people on the ballot. It is incredibly important to safeguard civic space and empower young peace builders to take up leadership roles in their own countries. In May, we heard from Irina Hasiks, for instance, on her organization's work in Bosnia and Herzegovina to bridge gaps between ethnic groups that live together but never interacted with each other. Thirdly, we should be wary of sweeping generalizations depicting young people as potential spoilers or terrorists. It is true that a large part of combatants and armed forces are young people. Many have been traumatized by conflict, violence, and the effects of displacement. But let's focus on their potential for leadership and resilience. That was shown to us by Nujeen Mustafa or Ilwat Elman. 4. The internet and technology create an unseen level of global online interconnectedness, and young people are uniquely placed to leverage this force for good. We have the responsibility to lay the groundwork by establishing legal protections for the generations that follow us. We need to invest in mental health programs for children and young people and ensure that we fight against fake news and online hate speech in order to curb division in societies. New technologies also have a positive potential for social cohesion to increase engagement and trust in the government and peace processes. For instance, UN peace missions in Afghanistan, Cyprus, Iraq, and Liberia have fostered intergenerational dialogue between people and political actors this way. And finally, regional organizations can play an important role in youth engagement. We seize the opportunity to congratulate the African Union Special Envoy Aya Chebi for her efforts in building awareness of the young generations in the fight against COVID-19. Youth engagement is also a priority of the European Union. In the EU Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy, specific actions are outlined in order to support the inclusion of young people, in particular young women, in all efforts for conflict prevention and sustaining peace. Many of these projects are carried out together with UN partners like UNICEF, UNFPA, and UNDP. Mr. President, let me conclude by reaffirming Belgium's commitment to continue to invest in creating a safe space for young people in the UN and beyond. Thank you so much.
I want to thank Karen, the TPR of Belgium, for her statement. And again, remind participants to please mute your mics when not speaking, because it's a live broadcast of the Security Council Arria-Formula meeting. And we are accompanied by a lot of viewers in YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, managed by our experts at the headquarters of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation in Pretoria, Public Diplomacy Unit. They are managing these lines. So they're reminding us to please mute your mics, because some viewers elsewhere are complaining about the irritation. So please remember, it's a live broadcast. So we want these viewers in YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook to accompany us to the end. Thank you very much. And I want to give the floor to Indonesia.
Mr. Chair, we thank South Africa and other co-sponsors for organizing this very important meeting. We also thank all briefers for their insightful presentations on youth, peace, and security. It is befitting on the 5-year anniversary of the first ever resolutions on youth, peace, and security to engage in a dialogue focused on youth participations in the prevention and resolutions of conflicts. Youth should be actively engaged in shaping lasting peace, including during these pandemic situations. There are many extraordinary young people who creatively develop pathways to contribute to justice and reconciliations. Excellencies, colleagues, as a co-sponsor of the latest adopted YPS Resolution 2535 this year, allow me to highlight 3 pertinent areas on this matter. First, trust building should be fostered through inclusive policies and programs that disengage youth from violence. The UN Progress Study, The Missing Piece, highlighted that youth are often associated to the rise of radicalizations to violence and violent extremism. To address this stigma, our policies and programs should include, among others, access to quality educations, employment opportunities, and community engagements. As specifically mentioned by UN Envoy, youth need an opportunity to gain the right tools and mindsets to be constructive agents for durability of peace. Second, promoting the important role of United Nations systems and regional organizations in this agenda. Youth participation is a key stakeholders in institutional governance mechanisms is a bridge to mainstreaming youth-related perspectives in national policy. Therefore, UN peacekeeping and special political missions can serve as an interface to build youth capacities. In addition, regional organizations such as ASEAN and African Union also play crucial roles to facilitate constructive engagements with youth and to develop youth capacity in governance. Third, engaging youth with their local communities. Based on the local knowledge of their own communities, the creativity of youth in conflict areas can lend to building peace horizontally and vertically. Together with peacekeeping missions, they can help to restore social cohesion within divided communities. These efforts include innovative ways of facilitating intercommunal dialogue to prevent conflict and encourage reconciliation process in post-conflict settings. Excellencies, colleagues, 3 resolutions on YPS reflect our strong commitment to actively engage youth in peace processes and to implement this agenda. We believe that young people must always be an integral part of peace process. I thank you.
I want to thank Raka, the representative of Indonesia, for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Germany.
Mr. President, Jerry, thanks a lot for giving me the floor, and thanks for pulling off this important meeting. The 5th anniversary of the Security Council's Youth, Peace and Security agenda, that's quite something. And it's very fitting that today, I think this has been the first time in the context of the Security Council that all the briefers that we have heard are indeed young people. This is a good thing, and it's something that we should do much more often. Generations have to listen to each other. I think that holds true at home around the kitchen table. It should also hold true here in the context of the Security Council. In our time in the Security Council, Germany brought in Nadia Murad, Nujin Mustafa, and other young briefers to the Council. And I believe that these briefings have left their marks on our discussions. We believe that intergenerational dialogue entails that each generation enjoys full set of human rights, that women are empowered, that people with disabilities can fully participate, and that both younger and older persons, including with diverse sexual orientation and gender identities, are integrated. But dialogue is not a means in itself, and it's nothing without concrete action. I agree with what we heard from our briefers earlier on. There is a lack of concrete action, and there's no denying that. Even in this important 5th anniversary year of the Youth, Peace and Security agenda, and even although we revitalized this agenda in Resolution 2535. Therefore, we encourage all UN missions, both peacekeeping and political missions, to adopt a mission-wide YPS strategy, to establish YPS focal points, and to regularly report on this pertinent issue. One example of best practice that we find very promising is what the UN verification mission in Colombia is doing. I think this is an example that is worth looking into and copying in other places. The work of the UN Peacebuilding Commission has also focused on the inclusion and participation of youth in peacebuilding, transitional and post-conflict environments. We strongly support that. We strongly support the work of the Secretary General's Peacebuilding Fund, which is another powerful tool in promoting the YPS agenda. We take this very seriously in the framework of our humanitarian aid. We systematically support projects that involve youth and that take their specific needs into account. Last Friday, Jerry, we discussed in the Council the importance of greater cooperation between the Security Council and the African Union. The topic of youth involvement can be an important example for stronger cooperation between these two international bodies, as both youth envoys have demonstrated and have told us today. This all certainly holds true in times of COVID. Let me make one last remark. I find it very encouraging to see such strong commitment today from the incoming Security Council members. their commitment, your commitment to the YPS agenda is definitely worth the while, dear colleagues. Do forge ahead with that, bringing in young briefers and human rights defenders to the Council, taking up UN peace missions on their task to mainstream youth issues, asking for reporting on youth in conflict and making sure that youth get their seat at the table during peace talks. Germany continues to remain firmly committed to this agenda. This will continue to be important for us beyond our time in the Security Council. Let me just give you 3 very short examples. In Colombia, we will continue to support the United Nations Institute for Training and Research in its youth-led peace and reconciliation approach. Then secondly, in the framework of our development cooperation, we have adopted the action plan, Agents of Change, Children and Youth Rights in German Development Cooperation Activities. This puts a strong focus on the right to participation enshrined in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And lastly, Germany is committed to building the expertise of youth, in particular young women, and to increase opportunities for their participation in the disarmament area and the framework of the OSCE. As I said earlier on, we continue to be fully committed to the YPS agenda and to the dialogue between generations at the kitchen table, in the Security Council, and out there in the real world. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Gunther, the DPR of Germany, for your statement. I now give the floor to the President of the United States.
Thank you, Ambassador. And thank you to you and to the co-host for holding this discussion today, recognizing the important and courageous work of youth leaders globally. It's such an important issue, and we're so glad that you're leading on this along with the co-host today. And a special thank you to the youth leaders who briefed us today as well. I mean, your hard work and your dedication, it's improving your communities, it's making your countries better, and your experiences and your insight and your expertise, it's precisely what this council needs to hear as we take our decisions related to the maintenance of international peace and security around the world. So thank you. I echo a lot of the points raised by the panelists today and a lot of my colleagues here today as well about the importance of amplifying the voices of youth leaders and ensuring that they have a seat at the table. The United States remains committed to enhancing the implementation of the youth peace and security agenda, both within the UN system and externally with youth leaders and civil society through intergenerational dialogue. But it's not just dialogue. I like the way it was put by one of the panelists today, an intergenerational co-leadership. I think that's exactly right. It's a good way to put it. You know, today there are an increasing number of leaders and government institutions around the world that are facing a deficit of trust and credibility with their own citizens. When young people lack access to opportunities, they're marginalized or discriminated against, they face security threats, they become more vulnerable to criminal and terrorist groups that target and recruit them, as was mentioned by several people today. Lack of accountability in justice systems and impunity can deepen this frustration, which then in turn deepens the vulnerability. It's a bad cycle. We as a council have a duty to ensure that young people participate meaningfully and safely in civic life. It's our responsibility to promote a safe environment for all human rights defenders, including civil society actors and peace builders. The United States remains very concerned about attacks and limitations on young people's rights to freedom of expression, to freedom of movement, to peaceful assembly, and freedom of association in countries around the world. You know, we also have to explore new safe technologies and platforms to engage with youth and to encourage their participation in community and civic life, including in policy discussions. I mean, this is even more important during the COVID-19 pandemic, as many of these discussions today are online, like we're doing here today and we've done in the Security Council often since March. An example of a platform that can be used as a tool both for good and bad is online gaming. You know, it's While it has served as a tool for terrorist recruitment and radicalization in some cases, it can also serve as a useful tool for advancing social good. An example of that is an online game called Bad News. In it, players take on the role of a fake news tycoon looking to build a media empire. Games like this one, which has been rigorously evaluated by many people, they build player media and digital literacy to recognize and reject polarizing, conspiratorial, and hateful false news stories. In addition, regional and sub-regional organizations play an important role in mobilizing youth leaders to build a more prosperous, safe, and free future. The African Union has integrated youth into important political processes, as we've heard today, to reduce conflict through the Agenda 2063 and the Silencing the Guns initiative. The UN should also take further steps to mainstream the youth, peace, and security agenda into its work. Security Council Resolution 2535 encourages the Secretary General to develop internal mechanisms within the United Nations system to broaden the participation of youth, including efforts aimed at improving capacity building. So now we must do everything in our power to ensure that young people's views are reflected in our policies and that their participation is included in efforts to prevent, resolve, and recover from conflict and crisis. And it's not, as I said before, and has been said even better by our participants today, it's not just participation, but it's youth leadership as we prevent, resolve, and recover from conflicts and crises. They are the future, and all of our future relies on their inclusion and empowerment. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thanks, Rodney, the political coordinator at the United States mission in New York. Now I want to give the floor to the Minister of Estonia.
Thank you, Jerry. And I would like to thank South Africa and the co-hosts for organizing today's meeting, and also the briefers for their thorough overview of the issue. Today we celebrate the 5th anniversary of the landmark Resolution 2250 on youth, peace, and security. This year, we also had the first ever report of the Secretary General on the same topic. While hoping for this to become a regular occurrence to ensure a consistent focus on YPS, it is us, the members of the Security Council, who must continue and increase our efforts. We cannot build a resilient and peaceful society without including the next generation. Young people are the vital driving force behind new ideas, solutions, and innovation. They have a right to participate in public life and decision-making processes. There are almost 2 billion young women and men aged 10 to 24 years in the world. Providing these young people meaningful and genuine ways to participate and shape their societies is the best way to avoid tensions and conflicts and to ensure peace instead. If we fail to do that, we risk alienating roughly 25% of the world's population, the ones who take care of our societies and take the societies forward. Moreover, the failure to address the needs and rights of the youth impedes an end to sustainable peace. It is important to recognize the growing role youth plays in peace and security. The youth should not be treated as passive civilians. We sincerely hope that implementing and strengthening youth peace and security resolutions is a continuing trend in the United Nations. We must continue to show others the way forward. I would like to thank UNICEF and Save the Children organizations, among others, for their important work on children and youth. On country level, there are still visible barriers to youth participation in decision-making. Youth activists continue to be subject of human rights violations and abuses. We have said it before and will continue stressing it. Any threats, attacks, and acts of intimidation made against youth peace builders, human rights defenders, especially women activists, are unacceptable. We must overcome these problems collectively. The local youth should be ensured a meaningful chance to participate in public life. There is still a long way to go, but there are already visible achievements. The ad hoc inclusion of YPS in our work must evolve into a systematic approach. The youth reminds us that we need to take a long-term, sustainable, and forward-looking approach in peace and security, as well as on climate and human rights. These are their rights, and it is our obligation to listen to them. I am convinced that multilateralism has a lot to win from encouraging, listening, and supporting youth. Thank you, Jerry.
I want to thank Sven, the permanent visitor of Estonia to United Nations, for his statement. I want to now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are grateful to the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, Ms. Vikramanya Yake, African Union Envoy on Youth, Ms. Chebi, as well as other briefers for their views. We believe in great potential of young people in playing an important role in a wide range of peace processes, particularly through meaningful participation in resolution of conflicts, peace building, and sustaining peace. Security Council Resolutions 2250, 2419, and 2535 recognize the need for constructive engagement of youth in such activities. It is especially true for the African continent, where young people constitute the majority of the population. And that is the reason for calling Africa a continent of youth. African Union Agenda 2063 highlights the importance of valuable contribution of youth in promoting peace and security. Young people take a worthy place in implementation of the initiative on silencing the guns in Africa by 2020. At the same time, it's irresponsible to ignore the challenges we face. Young people, especially those who lack life experience or education, often search for self-identification. It makes them particularly vulnerable to radical ideologies. Young people are among the first to feel the negative consequences of economic crisis, social instability, and armed conflicts. These factors are often exploited to involve them in illegal activities, including through social networks. That is why it's our collective task to strengthen international cooperation to protect youth from negative influence, to cut off channels through which terrorist groups incite young people and combat the use of internet for recruitment. These elements should be also central in youth, peace and security agenda. We are convinced that the involvement of youth in any peace initiative should be based first and foremost on their professional knowledge and skills. Moreover, it's necessary to protect young people from any political activities until they reach legal age. It's also vital that proclaimed support for young leaders should not result in organizing anti-government movements in sovereign states by external stakeholders. Unfortunately, we are witnessing such situations frequently. National efforts in the peace building and enhancing social cohesion, including through intergenerational dialogue, are indispensable. We are convinced in the importance of advancing a culture of peace and tolerance among young people. For this goal, it's a national responsibility of each state to create necessary conditions that can enable young people to realize their full potential and become socially, economically, and politically integrated in society, particularly by providing a high-quality education and employment opportunities. It's vital to encourage young people to participate in socially meaningful activities, help them improve their skills and talents, increase their self-confidence and self-esteem, promoting the concept of peaceful coexistence. The Russian Federation is undertaking active measures to support peaceful youth organizations and promote intercultural and interreligious dialogues among youth. Our national efforts are also aimed at integration of young people into the social and political activities, as well as preventing the spread of radical and terrorist ideology among them. These principles are at the core of the Russian national policy on youth until 2025, implemented at the federal, regional, and municipal levels. Colleagues, Mr. President, we thank the delegation of South Africa for organizing this event dedicated to the issue pertinent to the African continent in an Arria-Formula format that provides for flexible and informal exchange of views. At the same time, we note that some members, since recently, try to impede holding of those Arria-Formula meetings they do not like or to ignore them. We consider such behaviors unacceptable and disrespectful to the freedom of speech. If this trend persists, instead of Arria-Formula meetings, we will get interest clubs and fragmented discussions. Our decision to be here today and present our view reflects our rejection of such scenarios. I thank you very much.
I thank Anna, the DPR of Russian Federation, for her statement. I now give the floor to the permanent representative of Vietnam. Quy.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Mr. President. And I'd like to express my sincere thanks to the co-host for convening this important meeting. I also thank all briefers for their excellent presentation. Mr. President, Resolution 2250 2015 on YPS was adopted, and we have witnessed significant progress since then. However, numerous challenges have still remained, such as structural barriers, disruption of education, the risk of being recruited into the terrorist group, and the insufficient investment in facilitating the inclusion of youth to enable young people to unleash their full potentials and to promote the implementation of the YPS agendas. Vietnam wishes to highlight the following points. First, young people must be provided with opportunity to be involved in decision-making at all levels, including mechanisms for prevention, management, and resolution of conflict, and in peace negotiations. We should also provide regular platforms, intergenerational dialogues to share lessons learned and experience in the implementation of the YPS agenda. Second, as education is a key element in shaping the prospect and opportunity for young people, as well as addressing the root causes of conflict and violent extremism, we should continue building an investment in relevant education system of all forms and provide youth with a wide range of educational and vocational training opportunity. In this connection, we condemn all attacks targeting educational institutions and request conflict-related government to provide them with adequate protection. Third, we need further push a radical shift of awareness and increase funding to the accelerated implementation of the YPS agenda. We should focus on, among others, funding for capacity building and partnerships between youth-led organizations and the UN member states, UN entities, and regional organizations. Besides, the UN should promote the connection among countries on knowledge and experience sharing and resources mobilizing to help the young people to participating fully in the economic and political life. Mr. President, youth represent the future of the country and serves as a powerful social force for building peaceful and just societies. Hence, the government of Vietnam has placed youth-related strategies high in its national development priority. We have developed a variety of policy and legal documents to make a full use of the proactivities, creativity, and huge potential of the young people. Youth organizations have also made great effort to unite young people in the country and protect their legitimate rights and interests. Finally, I would like to reiterate our commitment to joint efforts of the international community to ensure that the voices of youth are heard, their needs are addressed, while their contribution to peace and security are recognized and enhanced. I thank you, Jerry.
I want to thank Quy, the permanent representative of Vietnam at the United Nations. Now, colleagues, we have listened to the last member of the Security Council addressing this live broadcast of the Council Arria-Formula meeting. This live broadcast is managed by the public diplomacy at the Department of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa at its headquarters in Pretoria, by courtesy of Dr. Naledi Pandor, our minister. I want to thank you all, for those who are following the conversation on Twitter, on our social media account at SA Mission New York. Please use the hashtag SA in UN Security Presidency, hashtag SA in UNSC Presidency, and the hashtag YPS anniversary when you tweet further. So you are still live on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitter. Now I'm going to give the other members of the United Nations the chance to speak. I have 21 speakers who will take the floor. They are given 3 minutes each. Please be audible when you speak, because we want you thousands of followers to be with you. Although half of the world is asleep, half is awake. Even I see some tweeting that side of the world where Ambassador Kwe come from, Vietnam. People at that side are tweeting also. They are on YouTube and Twitter. So please be audible and deliver a statement that we can hear. Then I want to invite members of United Nations to speak. First of all is Denmark, on behalf of the 5 Nordic countries. Denmark, you take the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thanks to South Africa and the co-host for organizing this event, and not least for bringing insightful young briefers to the Council. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Nordic countries, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and my own country, Denmark. Your Excellencies, member of the Security Council, Resolution 2250 on youth, peace and security was a milestone for our efforts to achieve sustainable peace. And since its adoption, the agenda for youth inclusion has gained more momentum, often as a result of youth's own actions and demands. Young people are increasingly recognized as peace builders, agents of change in preventing, mitigating, and resolving conflict in their communities. But there's still a long way to go. Youth have the right to both participate and to be heard in matters regarding their own lives. Still, young people continue to meet structural barriers and societal limitations to their participation in peace and security efforts, and more widely in political, economic, and cultural life. In addition, the specific needs and vulnerabilities of youth in armed conflict must be recognized and addressed. We would like to highlight the gender perspectives and safe access to education as key elements in responding to the protection needs of youth and enabling their participation. The UN and its member states must renew and strengthen efforts to secure the implementation of the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda on the ground. Today, we must take stock and look ahead. Member states and the Security Council must work to ensure that the positive momentum continues by ensuring full implementation of the agenda and further accelerating the involvement of young people in preventing conflict, as well as shaping and maintaining peaceful resolution of conflicts. We commend the African Union and the African Union Envoy on Youth, Ms. Arria-Formula, for the comprehensive efforts to mobilize the participation and engagement of youth in the implementation of the flagship program Silencing the Guns and the 10-year implementation plan for the Continental Framework on Youth, Peace and Security 2020 to 29. We also welcome a stronger partnership between the UN and the African Union in moving this agenda forward. The Nordic countries have a long tradition of meaningful youth engagement, also when it comes to the peace and security agenda. Collectively, the Nordic countries support a range of youth-led initiatives at the national and international level. One example is our support to the Global Community Engagement and Resilience Fund that promotes young people as active leaders in building and sustaining peace and preventing violent extremism in their communities. We welcome the innovative approaches to youth engagement in peace and security processes that some member states have undertaken, and encourage other member states to follow example and accelerate progress towards shaping policies, tools, projects, and programs to better accommodate the voices of young people in peace and security process. Providing predictable and flexible funding is key to achieve this. Finally, as has been repeatedly established, young people play an important positive role in their communities before, during, and after the eruption of conflict. At the 5th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 2250, we wish to see the agenda further strengthened through especially 3 measures. Firstly, through Member States' accelerated action to operationalize the resolution on the YPS at the local and national level, for example, through national action plans, roadmaps, or guidelines. Secondly, through the Security Council's continuous incorporation of youth perspectives, like today, including by mandates that provide for effective participation of youth in peace and security efforts. Thirdly, and finally, through a strengthened focus on protection of young mediators, peace builders, and human rights defenders. I thank you.
I want to thank Marie-Louise on behalf of the 5 Nodi countries for her statement. Colleagues, all of you, co-hosts, Security Council members, briefers, talk about the historic 225 resolution. We want to invite the permanent representative of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan that usher in that 225 resolution. Ambassador, you have the floor. Sima, we can't hear you. Unmute, Sima. Unmute.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. Yeah. I'd like to thank you, and through you, South Africa, and all the esteemed co-hosts and organizers for hosting this important meeting to celebrate the YPS agenda and the 5th anniversary of the historic Security Council Resolution 2250. My thanks also go to the inspirational young briefers and young peace builders who enriched our discussion today. These young generators of peace and peace builders are our major capital in the face of threats to peace and security and to building and sustaining peaceful communities and a peaceful world. Mr. President, we are going through a very difficult, unprecedented time that is affecting us all. The repercussions and implications of the COVID-19 pandemic, of climate change, of conflicts worldwide, of rising poverty, of food insecurity, and many others have far-reaching effects on our countries, on our societies, on our economies, on our youth, and on our lives. These times are casting us into an unclear circumstance, but one thing remains very clear: the crucial role of youth, both female and male, in society, and the importance of garnering their agency, their resilience, and their potential in addressing the challenges facing us today and in building a safer, more peaceful and secure world. Mr. President, youth play a critical role in conflict prevention and peace building, and we must continue to invest our support in young peace builders so that they can continue to play an effective and meaningful role in helping implement the UNSG's call for global ceasefire and in enabling youth to participate in a meaningful manner in conflict prevention, conflict resolution, state building, and peace building processes. Jordan's unequivocal commitment to enhancing the lives of young women and men that comprise more than 70% of our population, and our belief in young people as active agents of change prompted us to take this vision internationally by proudly being the first country to bring the YPS agenda to the Security Council in 2015 through Security Council Resolution 2250, the first resolution fully dedicated to the important and positive role young women and men can play in the maintenance and promotion of our regions and the world's peace and security. Today, 5 years later, we have successfully managed to work on institutionalizing, organizing, and develop the youth agenda in Jordan by adopting an ambitious national youth strategy. The strategy was developed from the perspective of partnerships among various stakeholders, governmental institutions, ministries, civil society, youth and youth-led organizations, the private sector, and the United Nations and international partners. With UNSC's Resolution 2250 and its ensuing resolutions 2419 and 2535, Jordan feels that we have laid a solid foundation, and we will continue to work with all partners to further the YPS agenda. The resolution has helped change mindsets and stereotypes about youth as assets in society and not problems, as a positive, resilient force that has much to offer through meaningful, inclusive engagement, as peace builders, as peace sustainers, as active development agents, and much more. Mr. President, building intergenerational trust is key for our joint efforts in furthering the YPS agenda and in unlocking the peace dividends. Our role is to strengthen our support to youth, to their networks, to their organizations, to strengthen their capacities, and to advocate for young people to be fully engaged and to facilitate their participation in implementing their own development, in addressing climate change, in protecting human rights, in preventing violence and extremism, and in promoting a culture of tolerance and intercultural and interreligious respect and peace. Most importantly, to ensure their access to quality education, to quality health services, and to economic opportunities, and to give them the hope and the horizon that protects them from being lured by extremism, violence, and terrorism. We need to continue to mobilize every effort and encourage governments, leaders, international donors to direct more resources and more funds to youth programs and policies that foster their meaningful inclusion, that promote civic engagement, and that ameliorate their roles as agents of change and peace building, and that help to end all kinds of violence against women and girls and against children. Our investment in young women and girls' education empowers them and opens their eyes to a vast world of opportunities to better their lives, to refuse extremism, to refuse conflict, to spread the culture of peace, and to promote the values of peace, human rights, justice, equality, and inclusion. This is our responsibility. And finally, Mr. President, our present and the future is all about amplifying and investing and respecting and strengthening and supporting our youth, increasing their space, amplifying their voice and their agency. We need to continue to exert every joint effort to support them, and we will. And as our youth envoy said earlier in this session, this is our responsibility and it is the youth's right. I thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank Sima, the
Thank you, Jerry.
of Jordan, and initiator and facilitator of the landmark resolution 2250. Colleagues, now I'm going to give Peru, the initiator and facilitator of resolution 2419 of 2018. Peru, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, Jerry. We would like to thank the delegations of South Africa, Dominican Republic, France, Ireland, Kenya, Niger, Norway, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Tunisia for convening this Arria meeting on an agenda item Peru is very supportive. The 5th anniversary of the Security Council Resolution 2250 represents a milestone in the Council for introducing the Youth, Peace and Security agenda into its work. In 2018, Peru and Sweden together promoted the Resolution 2419 with the goal of moving forward in strengthening this agenda. From our perspective, young people are fundamental actors not only for achieving and preserving peace and security. Most important, their participation is essential for making peace sustainable. In that regard, their meaningful and effective participation should be promoted in all processes. Any decision that may affect their future shall be drafted and adopted, taking into account their concerns and opinions. In order to duly implement this participation, a strong political commitment is needed, and in particular, the support of the Security Council is essential. Hence, we encourage Council members to advocate the promotion of youth in all peace processes, considering that the benefits and consequences of the decisions made today will echo. Authorities at all levels must acknowledge the benefits of promoting youth participation. Bringing and incorporating them as active actors rather than mere observers will contribute to collaborate and implement more comprehensive and sustainable plans, of which all interested actors feel part to and committed to. In that regard, we would like to call the Security Council member, as well of the UN, to strengthen their support for advancing and promoting youth, peace and security agenda as a way to achieve and ensure peace and security. I thank you, Mr. President.
Arria, take the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Sorry, I could not hear you earlier. Mr. President, at the outset, I would like to express my gratitude to the delegation, of course, of the Republic of South Africa and the co-organizers for this initiative and convening this timely meeting, and as well the great briefers earlier today, especially the Secretary General Envoy on Youth. Since the adoption of Security Council Resolution 2250, the State of Qatar has been keen to support. The State of Qatar has been keen to support the international efforts to implement the Youth Peace and Security Agenda. In 2019, the State of Qatar participated with Finland and Colombia in organizing the first international symposium on youth participation.
If we start now, we'll have to continue.
Colleagues, please mute your mics. We are live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Let's give President of Qatar the chance to speak.
Thank you. So the State of Qatar participated with Finland and Colombia in organizing the first international symposium on youth participation in peace processes held in Helsinki. A major output of the symposium was a policy paper entitled "We Are Here," an integrated approach to youth inclusive peace processes, which included 17 important recommendations in order to enhance the participation of youth in peace processes. On the occasion of the 5-year anniversary of the adoption of Resolution 2250-2015, we are pleased today to announce that the State of Qatar will host a high-level global conference on youth-inclusive peace processes to be held in Doha on 29th and 30th of May of 2021. We are honored to cooperate in organizing this conference with Finland, Colombia, the Office of the Secretary General Envoy on Youth, and the Qatari-based organization Education Above All Foundation, in addition to a number of relevant United Nations bodies. The high-level global conference aims to strengthen the political will and commitment towards including youth in peace processes. It also aims to showcase progress on implementing the key recommendations of the global policy paper from the first international symposium held in Helsinki. The conference outcome will include a launch of the guidelines in support of country-level implementation of the Youth Peace and Security Agenda and a 5-year strategy on strengthening youth-inclusive peace processes. We are confident that this conference will mark the turning point for the Youth Peace and Security Agenda by generating political commitments at the national level and by strengthening an enabling environment for youth-inclusive peace processes to become more sustainable. We are pleased to inform that the issue of promoting the participation of young women in peace processes is an integral part of the conference program. Gender equality was also taken into consideration in all stages of the preparations, implementation, and the follow-up on the outcome of the conference. In conclusion, Mr. President, I would like to assure you that the State of Qatar, alongside the co-organizers of the international conference are working to ensure that the participation in the conference include the largest number possible of young men and women from countries going through conflict, as well as a wide participation from countries engaged in mediating role in peace processes. And I thank you again for the opportunity.
I want to thank Arria, the President of Qatar, for her statement and delivered on time, exactly 3 minutes as we allocated. I then want to give the floor to the representative of Egypt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just checking that everything is working.
We can hear you very well. 30 seconds are gone, but we can hear you very well.
Perfect. I will make up for it in speed. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for and the other co-hosts for convening this meeting to co-host today's Arria-Formula meeting on to mark the 5-year anniversary of Security Council Resolution 2250 on youth, peace, and security. I would similarly like to express our deep appreciation for both the UNSG and the AU envoys on youth and the other briefers for their esteemed participation. The aforementioned resolution urged member states to give youth a greater voice in decision-making at the local, national, regional, and international levels, and to consider setting up mechanisms that would enable young people to participate meaningfully in peace processes. Youth between the age of 15 and 24 make up nearly 17% of the world's population, 20% of Africa's population, and 21% of Egypt's. They are thus a powerful force that can contribute to peace and stability, as well as actively engage in our long sought after sustainable development. In that context, Egypt launched in 2016, and just 1 year after Resolution 2250 was adopted, and under the auspices of His Excellency the President of Egypt, the World Youth Forum, an annual forum that provides a platform for international youth interaction and inter-regional youth discussions on an array of different topics that include peace and security, achieving sustainable development, science, technology, and innovation, others. This is in line with Egypt's strong commitment to supporting the important role of youth in the African continent, as envisioned in the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, as well as supporting the African Peace and Security Architecture, APSA, and the major role of youth in the context of the African Union Silencing the Gun Initiative and its strategic roadmap adopted in 2017, which Egypt fully supports. Furthermore, and to highlight Egypt's commitment to the empowerment of youth as stipulated in our national strategy, Egypt Vision 2030, this has materialized by a significant and growing increase in the positions that are accorded to youth in both government and sub-regional positions in Egypt. To conclude, Excellencies, once again, Egypt reiterates the important role of youth in peace and security, as well as the inter-regional and international cooperation between youth. Thank you for your kind attention, and I believe I'm also well within the 30 seconds. Thank you, Chair.
I want to thank the DPR of Egypt. You are well within the 3 minutes allocated. Thank you very much for your statement. I then want to give the floor to the Minister of Eritrea.
Good afternoon, Jerry. Can you hear me?
Very well. We can hear you very well.
Thank you very much. I'd like to congratulate South Africa for convening this very important Arria meeting on Resolution 2525 on youth, peace, and security. On the anniversary of this landmark resolution, and as the world copes with the COVID-19 pandemic, the role of the youth in peace and security, and most importantly, in post-COVID recovery in Africa and elsewhere remains paramount. The theme, capitalizing on intergenerational dialogue to build and sustain peace and enhance social cohesion at community levels, is one that Eritrea can relate to. And when the briefers were speaking earlier, it was a welcome voice of the young that we have been wanting to hear and have been listening to in Eritrea for quite some time. Eritrea's youth play a central role in the liberation of Eritrea, and in the post-independence Eritrea, they've been paramount and vital in the development strategy. Their participation is critical for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, the African Union's 2063 agenda, and for silencing the guns in Africa. Social cohesion is the topic here, and the strength of the relationships and the solidarity of Eritreans and Eritrean society was seen most vividly in the past year as the world faced the global pandemic. As you know, Eritrea institutes a very strict lockdown strategy to prevent the spread and contain the pandemic. In the midst of the challenges like the COVID crisis, it was Eritrea's young people in general and members of the National Union of Eritrean Youth and Students who led the national response. This grassroots organization with a membership of over 300,000 youth across Eritrea is responsible for many things: unity, patriotism, education, promoting common sense of identity, disseminating information to the young people in Eritrea, and the youth who have been primary victims of conflicts are playing a decisive role in promoting peace and security in the region. Young people make up the majority of the population in Eritrea. 47% of the country's population is less than median age of 19 years, and so makes it more vital that a youthful population of this size is well informed and empowered, especially in times of crisis like the current pandemic. The National Union of Eritrean Youth and Students deployed more than 1,000 members across the country to monitor people's movement, create awareness of the virus, and provide support to needy community members with a focus on young people. So far, their efforts to empower young people with the right information and instill a sense of responsibility in them have contributed to relatively low infection and death rates in Eritrea. As of December 7th, there's only been 649 cases of COVID-19, and the good news is that there have been 0 deaths, and the gradual lockdown, the restrictions are now being removed. The full participation of citizens in the cultural, social, economic, and political development promotes a culture of ethnic and religious tolerance and respect for one another amongst this diverse population. Recently, in 2019, a workshop on East African consultation on the roles and contribution of youth to peace and security in Africa was held in Eritrea. The workshop was attended by youth from 15 East African countries. It was the most auspicious that the East African Regional Consultation took place in Asmara, affording an opportunity for Eritrean youth to share their experiences in terms of how they're contributing to peace and security in the region. Eritrea believes cooperation, harmony, building bridges, and mutuality amongst youth in the region will enhance sustained peace and development. Finally, Mr. President, intergenerational dialogue is important, not just to impart experiences and knowledge, but also to safeguard history and promote a culture of ethnic and religious tolerance and respect in our countries. I thank you.
Thanks, Sophia, the Prime Minister of Eritrea, for her statement. I now give the floor to the Representative of Slovakia. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, dear Jerry. It's a great pleasure to join this debate and to contribute also from our perspective. And first of all, congratulations to you and to all the other co-hosts for this important initiative. And we also appreciate the briefings that we have received from the Secretary General's Special Envoy and African Union Special Envoy and others. Allow me to highlight 3 points on the important issue as a reflection on recent 5 years of role of youth in peace and security. First, participation. Right to participate in public affairs is not only recognized by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, but it has also proven to be beneficial as young people can bring different perspectives, new ideas, and indeed unconventional and innovative solutions, and that's the particularly important added value.
Young people need to be part of peace processes and negotiations, and they have to be empowered to take roles within UN missions as well. The Security Council needs to continuously reflect on youth when establishing mission mandates, include them as briefers during its meetings, and engage them as standard and frequent partners during their country visits. Only active and systematic participation of youth is what really counts. I have myself on numerous occasions had an opportunity to engage with the youth in Latin America or in Africa, just to give an example. And I have seen on numerous occasions that they are often the drivers of change and the agents of change, and we need to use them better in that context, also in our peace and security related efforts. Second, on coordination. We have just heard about many great initiatives in different parts of the world that aim to engage, empower, and create space for young people. These are often led by enthusiasts or volunteers without sometimes proper planning, funding, or support. And that's where the governments and the UN as well should step in by developing dedicated roadmaps, creating partnerships and networks, and ensuring adequate funding for the implementation efforts. Only with effective coordination at local, national, and international level, and by inclusive approach of all stakeholders, we can really achieve tangible results. And the UN 2030 Youth Strategy certainly gives us an important framework for doing exactly that. My last point is on contribution. Nowadays, more than before, we invite young people to attend and sometimes even to speak at various events and important processes. But we know that this is often not enough. We need to go beyond that. We need to provide them with adequate space to actively contribute to those efforts. And most of all, we need to start listening to what they are saying and be able to implement. Often, listening matters more than speaking. Without young people being heard or invited to actively participate and contribute to peace building and peacekeeping efforts, among others, we cannot achieve sustainable peace, and we will fail on our promise to leave no one behind. So let me finish with an invitation to us all to be better at listening and maybe a little bit less good at speaking or lecturing our young people. So with that, I thank you for this initiative again and return the floor back to you, Jerry. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michael, for your statement. That was the PR of Slovakia. I will now give the following group of countries the floor: Cyprus, European Union, Malaysia, and Japan. Now give the floor to Cyprus. Cyprus. I don't see Cyprus, and I see Olaf Skål is ready. I see Olaf is ready to take the. Is that Cyprus? Is that Cyprus? Cyprus, can you hear us? Okay, whilst waiting for Cyprus, I see the EU permanent representative is ready. Olaf Skål. Olaf, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. The EU is always ready. Good to see you. Congratulations on organizing this, Jerry, President. Congratulations to our co-organizers. And I want to give a special tribute to Jordan for having taken an early lead on this very important agenda. And of course, thank you also to the youth briefers today. Mr. President, there is no shortage of landmark outcomes and resolutions, including by the Security Council on the youth, peace and security agenda. But it's also true that, however, the success of the agenda is not measured in the amount of resolutions. It's measured in how we implement it And therefore, I'd like to focus on 3 key points for action to ensure that we proactively include and ensure a safe engagement by youth in building and sustaining peace. And in order to hear the voice of youth, I have asked my intern at the political section, Roxanne, to go through those 3 concrete points. Thank you, Jerry. Roxanne, please.
Thank you. First, strengthening the space for the participation of youth. Institutions, whether local, regional, or international, must work harder to mainstream and integrate the participation of youth across their activities. UN missions should regularly engage with and integrate youth across their peace-building initiatives. They can invest in capacity-building programs to develop young people's skills to participate in decisions and to sensitize local authorities on the importance of engaging youth. As the EU, we're also working on our part to strengthen institutional mechanisms to amplify the voice of youth. In June 2020, the EU adopted its first Council conclusions on youth in external action to cement the integration of youth, in particular young women, across our efforts in building lasting peace. More concretely, alongside the African Union, we launched in 2018 the AU-EU Youth Hub, which is a platform to involve young experts in innovative projects. One of the pilot projects implemented by Plan International with local partners focuses on the Lake Chad Basin and involves local youth in mapping and monitoring stabilization projects via a user-friendly online map-based platform. We're also currently looking to develop a young mediators network in Iraq capable of supporting local, regional, and national conflict resolution and mediation efforts. Second, partnerships with civil society networks and human rights defenders. We encourage the strengthening of partnerships with youth networks as a tool for social cohesion, including as part of the work of UN missions. In the context of the EU, we help civil society, educational institutions, and policymakers connect across the Euro-Mediterranean region to promote intergenerational dialogue and foster youth leadership through the Young Mediterranean Voices initiative. We also strongly support the valuable work of young human rights defenders and condemn in the strongest terms any act of reprisal against them. The EU calls for increased efforts to ensure their protection. The EU Human Rights Defenders Mechanism, which has benefited 30,000 human rights defenders since 2015, is open to any young defender who is at risk. We are fully supportive of the efforts of the UN Youth Envoy to develop a dedicated guidance on the protection of young people, including those who engage with the UN. It is an example of best practice within the UN to ensure that we remain focused on protecting those at the front line of promoting peace. Third, investing in youth. We must ensure sustainable investments in promoting youth in all their diversity across efforts to build and sustain peace. The EU is contributing to the UN Secretary General's Peace-Building Fund, and we welcome its increased focus on empowering women and youth with 25% of total funding dedicated to this for the period 2020-2024. We particularly welcome the recently released call for proposals under the Gender and Youth Promotion Initiative 2020. The meaningful inclusion of young people is an important aspect of the 2020 comprehensive review of the UN peacebuilding architecture. Thank you, Mr. President.
I want to thank Olaf, the EU representative, and the colleague. He says is an intent. Thank you very much for the statement. I now want to give the floor to the representative of Malaysia.
Mr. President, special thanks to your team and other co-hosts for organizing this meaningful conversation. Malaysia in particular attaches great importance to Resolution 2050 and its implementation. We were on the State Council in 2015 during the adoption of this landmark resolution, and we remain committed to support and promote the youth, peace and security agenda in all relevant platforms. While many speakers today spoke on the importance of inclusive participation and representation of young people in negotiations and decision-making during peace processes, Malaysia would like to highlight an equally important subject, namely youth engagement in countering violent extremism efforts in order to build and sustain international peace and security. Malaysia has always been firm in our stance that we could only end terrorism by tackling its root causes. We need to win the hearts and minds of the people, especially youth, that are more vulnerable being a target of radicalization and recruitment by terrorists. Through its Southeast Asia Regional Center for Counterterrorism, an agency under my Foreign Ministry, the Malaysian government has and will continue to conduct various engagement and outreach activities with youth designed to encourage youth participation in countering violent extremism through talks, discussion, and tabletop exercise on the subject. We have run campaigns aimed to bring together and encourage youth currently enrolled in public and private tertiary education institutions to formulate creative community-based solutions based on the theme bringing communities closer together. Our public awareness programs also include numerous engagement with youth called the University Lecture Series that have reached thousands of young people since 2011. This is aimed at creating mental firewalls among undergraduates by listening to and speaking to them on the danger of radicalization. We also launched a media campaign called Malaysian Voices Opposing Violent Extremism, which involved celebrities producing a series of audio and video public service announcements targeting the youth. At the same time, Malaysia strongly believes that it is also critical to ensure young people's meaningful and inclusive participation in the nation-building process, covering political, economic, and societal spheres. Greater youth involvement in this process will give them a sense of recognition and belonging, especially on policies and matters that affect them. Mr. President, to summarize, youth has a critical role as agents of change and actors in preventing conflict and building peace, and in contributing to the realization of the SDG. Malaysia stands ready to share our knowledge and experience on this matter. Thank you.
I want to thank the Minister Counselor at the Malaysian mission. Then I'm going to give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Republic of South Africa and co-organizers for convening this very important meeting. I also thank youth briefers for their valuable inputs. Japan welcomes the discussion today on the effective implementation of youth, peace and security agenda. It is of crucial importance to encourage the meaningful participation of youth in efforts at peace and security. In this context, I'm very pleased that the UN Envoy referred to human security, as Japan's engagement with the YPS agenda is based on the human security approach, which calls for the twin strategy of protection and empowerment, so that they can protect themselves and also fully develop their potential, enabling them to contribute to building peaceful societies. Japan is committed to advancing the participation of young people in the efforts of peace and security. For example, Japan has been supporting active involvement of youth and women in conflict management and peace in Sahel, especially in Mali, by scaling up good practices on stabilization and security-led youth in the Liptako-Guma region. Japan has also been supporting capacity building of youth community actors in the broader areas of Senegal with the training of 400 women and young peace mediators on peace and security management. Furthermore, Japan's been cooperating with the African Union and the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights on Youth Perception Survey on Conflict Prevention, Peace Building and Human Rights in Africa. The findings will facilitate advocacy strategies and public policies to advance the YPS agenda at the local, national, regional and continental levels. Japan reaffirms its unwavering commitment to building a world where human security is ensured and the young people's future are better protected and promoted. We look forward to working closely with the United Nations in these joint endeavors. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I want to thank the Representative of Japan for delivering his statement on time. Before I give the floor to the next group of speakers, I want to thank all those following the conversation on Twitter, on our social media account at SA Mission NY. Please use the hashtag SA in UNSC presidency and the hashtag YPS anniversary when you tweet further. Now I want to give the floor to the following 4 countries in this order: Poland, Malta, Bahrain, and Costa Rica. Now I give the floor to Poland.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would like to thank South Africa and co-sponsor for organizing this meeting, as well as express my appreciation for all the briefings, especially the briefers of our young briefers. Their passion and commitment prove to us how much we can learn from the young women and men across the globe. We appreciate having this discussion on the 5th anniversary of the landmark resolution 2250. Young women and men can contribute to peace processes in multiple ways, from monitoring ceasefires to resolving local level disputes, building relationships across social divisions and shaping peace agreements. They are the ones who will both face the long-term consequences on conflicts and enjoy the lasting benefits of today's peace agreements. Thus, their direct engagement will also deliver a greater legitimization of the whole peace process. Young people and their involvement in peace processes remained high on our agenda, also during Poland's membership in the Security Council. It's my pleasure to announce that recently Poland became a member of Champions of Youth Group, chaired by Kingdom of Jordan. This constitutes a confirmation of Poland's commitment to ensure continuous and meaningful participation of youth during all stages of policy shaping, including its implementation. Talking about youth, we also need to remember that it's not a homogeneous group, and particular attention should be paid to the needs of young people in more vulnerable situations. This is why one of the priorities of Poland in this respect is young people with disabilities, who are among the most marginalized and poorest of the world's youth population. In this vein, I would like to recall efforts undertaken by Poland to promote participation of persons with abilities, including youth, in peace processes and humanitarian planning throughout the Resolution 2475. Furthermore, we believe it's important that we don't see the youth peace and security agenda in the vacuum, and it has obvious synergies with women peace and security, children armed conflict, as well as SDGs and the wider human rights agenda. The YPS agenda should constitute an important component on the UN peacekeeping architecture, peace-building architecture. To conclude, the anniversary of 2250 resolution gives member states a perfect momentum to recommit to youth peace and security agenda and to translate the provision of other relevant resolutions into practice. Today, we have no doubt that it's our responsibility to guarantee the interregional dialogue that will ensure the plurality of voices and viewpoints. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Poland for her statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of Malta.
Thank you, Mr. President. Malta thanks South Africa for holding today's Arria-Formula meeting on the 5-year anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 2020 on youth, peace and security. We welcome the continued engagement being undertaken at the international level to ensure that this issue remains high on the agenda. Malta firmly believes that youth have an essential role to play in shaping the future of society. It is on. I'm sorry, is my video not on? Can you see me? Sorry, do you mind if I start again? I'm sorry.
Start again because the two were Facebook.
Yes, I'm sorry. We're having all these technical problems. Malta thanks South Africa for holding today's Arria-Formula meeting on the 5-year anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 2020 on youth, peace and security. We welcome the continued engagement being undertaken at the international level to ensure that this issue remains high on the agenda. Malta firmly believes that youth have an essential role to play in shaping the future of society. It is our responsibility to continue to place a spotlight on the individual role that youth have to play within society. It is equally necessary to ensure that we adopt a holistic approach in addressing the role of youth. To reach these aims, inclusivity and education are key. Societies must be able to provide their youth with the necessary education and employment opportunities that allow them to grow and thrive. In turn, the youth will feel inspired and motivated to contribute to the growth of their community. By offering a viable future, states will also be cutting off the oxygen supply from terrorist groups and extremist ideologies that depend on disillusioned youth to spread violence and sow the seeds of chaos. Malta embarked on the implementation of our national youth policy towards 2020, aiming at creating a futuristic vision of young people that is based upon the global values and principles set out by the 1998 Lisbon Declaration. In order to reinforce our efforts to have a youth-inclusive society, Malta has also lowered the official national voting age from 18 to 16 years old, thus allowing the young generation to be part of decision-making, which leads to innovative ideas and new faces within our political system. In order to further advance the YPS agenda, collaboration between the UN and regional organizations will ensure that the active youth ambassador and youth envoys serve as a catalyst for implementation. By working at grassroots level, can we ensure that peace is inclusive and sustainable, and conflict prevention and reconciliation is achieved. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, young people must fully be involved in addressing peace and security, as well as other global challenges to build back better. Thank you.
I want to thank Frezia, the permanent representative of Malta, for her statement. I now give the floor to permanent representative of Bahrain, Jamal.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to thank the delegation of South Africa and the co-hosting delegations for organizing today's meeting on this timely and important topic as the world continues to face the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. I also would like to thank all the briefers for their valuable remarks. Mr. President, under the guidance and leadership of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, King of Kingdom Bahrain, the Kingdom of Bahrain has placed the empowerment of youth and as one of its main national priorities. We have witnessed in Bahrain many successful initiatives that reflect the vision of His Royal Highness Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa, the Crown Prince and the Prime Minister, to invest in national skills and support the growing cadre of young professionals, thus enabling them to further the country's development. In November, His Highness Sheikh Nasser bin Hamad Al Khalifa, His Majesty the King's representative for humanitarian works and youth affairs, inaugurated the Youth Summit 2020, which aims to provide young people with a number of innovative and practical solutions to overcome challenges facing different sectors and boost the youth's contribution in decision making. Moreover, building on Bahrain's rich history as a multicultural and inclusive society, and align with its vision of upholding and promoting the values of mutual understanding and respect, interfaith dialogue, and peaceful coexistence, the King Hamad Global Center for Peaceful Coexistence established the King Hamad Faith and Leadership Fellowship Program in coordination with the universities of Oxford and Cambridge, in addition to the British Academy for Training. The program targets university students, members of sports clubs and youth centers, among others, with the aim of promoting among a new generation of young leaders the values of openness, pluralism, culture, harmony, and diversity. To conclude, Mr. President, I would like to reiterate Bahrain's firm commitment to the empowerment of youth and the advancement of their role in all fields in order to maintain regional and international peace and security and to advance the implementation of sustainable development goals. And thank you again, Mr. President.
I want to thank Yamal, the permanent representative of Bahrain, for delivering his statement on time. I now give the floor to the President of Costa Rica.
At the outset, Costa Rica would like to express its appreciation to South Africa, Kenya, Niger, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Tunisia, the Dominican Republic, France, Norway, and Ireland for co-hosting this Arria-Formula meeting to mark the 5th anniversary of Resolution 2250 on youth, peace, and security. Costa Rica would also like to thank the speakers for their insightful presentations. Costa Rica welcomes the stress placed on implementing our common commitments and thus delivering fully on the ambition of the existing framework on the youth, peace, and security agenda. And we would like to stress 2 points. Firstly, just as we did 20 years ago with the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, we should challenge the stereotypes that normalize young women's and girls' exclusions from peace and security processes. We need to pay attention to the gender dimension within the YPS agenda, just as we need to pay attention to the age in the WPS agenda. Discrimination, marginalization, and violence girls and young women experience often continue into adulthood, unless the necessary conditions are created for their empowerment and to ensure their full, equal, and significant participation. We must also recognize intersectional ties and strengthen the synergies between the WPS and YPS agendas, so we can reap the rewards obtained when women and girls become equitable participants in all peace and security deliberations and solutions. In this regard, the Security Council must ensure that all our energies are pulling in the same direction. Any competition between these 2 agendas undermines their fulfillment. Second, Costa Rica recognizes the role that young campaigners have had, many of them women, at the forefront of successful international campaigns to ban landmines, cluster munitions, and nuclear weapons. In this regard, Costa Rica recognizes the work that the Office of Disarmament Affairs is conducting to engage, educate, and empower young people through its Youth for Disarmament initiative, e-newsletters, training programs, and a dedicated youth website. Costa Rica applauds UDA's commitment to form meaningful collaborations that allow younger people to test their skills in a respectful and accessible environment. The positive contributions of young people can make to sustaining peace was also reaffirmed by the General Assembly in 2019 by adopting this resolution, Youth Disarmament and Non-Proliferation. Mr. President, this generation of youth is the largest in human history. Costa Rica recognizes the need for our political and social leadership to get younger, more diverse, more attentive to the values and aspirations of generations now and those to come, more sensitive to the unique constellations of obstacles and limitations from pandemics, violence, poverty, inequality, lack of opportunities, and displacements to climate change that millions of people face in all corners of the world. We have not set a very good table for them, but we cannot replicate the many mistakes that were made with us. Ready or not, it's their turn now. I thank you.
I want to thank Maritza, the DPR of Costa Rica, for her statement on time. I'm now going to give the following last group of countries the floor to speak: El Salvador, Fiji, Italy, Mexico, and Bangladesh, and remind all those who have joined us that we are still live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, and that you can log onto your account SA Mission New York and use hashtag SA in UNSC presidency and hashtag YPS anniversary. Now I want to give the floor to the President of El Salvador. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. President, Ambassador Jerry. I thank the organizers for convening this important meeting and the distinguished briefers for their valuable insights. While we welcome the progress made in the implementation of the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, we believe it's essential to foster our efforts to translate this agenda according to the specific challenges of different communities, those living in conflict, post-conflict settings, and those countries that are consolidating peace. Prevention and dialogue are key approaches to implement the YPS agenda, which are also crucial in our work to improve the condition of young people in El Salvador. For many years, our youth has been neglected and often marginalized, derailing them to illicit activities. Therefore, the government of President Nayib Bukele has set youth as a priority that had been translated into a renovated institutional framework, including a National Council for Youth. We have also carried out concrete actions to prevent the cycle of violence and to provide opportunities to those who live in marginalized communities. However, we recognize that much remains to be done. Young people around the world still face significant challenges, multiple and intersecting forms of violence and discrimination, inequalities, access to labor market, and the impacts of climate change. Each of these has been multiplied by the COVID-19 pandemic. Therefore, we believe that the YPS agenda implementation is a task that concerns everyone and in which political leadership is essential. 3 concrete recommendations. YPS agenda must be fully integrated into the organization's strategic and planning documents, including the UNSDCF, the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Frameworks. The Security Council should continue encouraging young people's participation in peace and security efforts, ensuring the mainstreaming of the agenda in missions mandates, and hearing the voices of youth in the work of the Council. And third, it is also essential to increase funding, including the Peace Building Fund and its Youth Promotion Initiative. Mr. President, this year also marks the 75th anniversary of this organization, and we believe that representation is another aspect of multilateralism that must be reviewed. We, decision makers, must ask ourselves if we are truly representing today's youth. As we also mark the 5-year anniversary of Resolution 2250 and the beginning of the Decade of Action for the Sustainable Development Goals, let's guarantee that the gains achieved in these past years are not reversed. Let's recommit to listen and to support the youth-led initiatives. Let's foster intergenerational dialogues and work together for peace, security, development, and human rights. I thank you.
I thank Griselda for her statement representing El Salvador, delivered on time. Now I want to give the floor to the Representative of Fiji. Ambassador Setianda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you and co-host for holding this debate, and congratulate youth activists across the Pacific and the world on the 5th anniversary. Despite our 5th anniversary of the resolutions, very significant challenges remain. Mr. President, you yourself have on several occasions reflected very deeply on the nexus between peacekeeping, peace building, and development, and how closely they are interlinked. And I welcome your reflections. Arising from that, we know that where these interlinkages are weak, securing and maintaining peace is much harder. When young people are excluded from building peace, they are less likely to be supportive of peace operations in conflict-affected areas. Where development is designed too far away in New York or Washington, it is less likely that young people will benefit from the peace dividend. Mr. President, we know also that COVID is ravaging societies and economies across the world. We probably also know by now that the worst is ahead of us rather than behind us. So it is time for very serious introspection. I have two thoughts to share with you, President and colleagues on the Security Council. In the modern world, conflicts and violence are far more likely to start in cyberspaces and then flow over and cause much suffering in the real world. Conflicts often are generated, fueled, and intensified digitally. Indeed, cyber conflicts have become intense real-world conflicts far too frequently, far too speedily. And I propose that the time for digital peace building has become a necessity. Several briefers, and I thank the briefers, have reminded the audience today that peace building can be youth-led, can be youth-framed, and can be youth-enabled if they are to be better sustained. The question before us is the UN and does the UN have the capabilities to respond to these challenges? My second suggestion to you, Mr. President and members of the Council, is that the YPS engagement I propose must change from an approach that is focused excessively on problems and challenges to an approach that is centered on solutions. Across conflict-affected environments, young people are offering many solutions. They're helping track conflicts. They're helping protect human rights defenders and helping identify human rights offenders. They offer low-cost solutions to climate crisis. They help move humanitarian assistance past roadblocks, past the cartels, past the merchants of business in the conflict-affected areas across the world. They offer thousands of practical solutions, as we have heard from Africa a few hours back. They offer solutions. And the question we need to pose is, does the UN have an architecture of peacekeeping and peace building that prohibits many of these solutions from becoming mainstream? It's a question we should pose to ourselves. When young people shape these solutions, they take risks. They are open to new threats. It is therefore fair that many young people do ask the question whether the UN and international community is with them or against them. Mr. President, the bridge between these fantastic discussions we are having right now and the lives of young people across conflict-affected regions is a long bridge. And this is where intergenerational dialogue to me has a catalytic role. Intergenerational dialogue done right can transform this long bridge into a bridge of hope. I know this is hard. To the E10 and to the P5 and to the incoming Security Council members, I urge you to give these proposed intergenerational dialogues your utmost and mark the 5th anniversary. I thank you, Mr. President, and the great nation of South Africa for the heroic and exceptional leadership that you have shown, not only in bringing this debate, but throughout your membership of the Security Council. And I wish all the briefers and people happy holidays. Thank you very much.
Thank Satyendra, the Prime Minister of Fiji, for the kind words to the presidency and your passionate input. And I'll give the floor to the President of Italy.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'd like to thank South Africa and all the co-hosts for organizing this meeting on the 5th anniversary of Resolution 2250, as well as the Youth Envoy and all the briefers for their insightful remarks, and of course to Jordan for their leadership. Italy firmly believes that young people are a vital driver for peace, change and prosperity. We are therefore staunchly committed to the implementation of the YPS agenda. We have supported from the outset the Youth 2030 strategy, and we were the first member state to provide financial support to the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth after her appointment. In our view, youth policies represent the best link between the peace and security agenda and Agenda 2030. Empowering young people and enabling them to make their voices heard was always a top priority for Italy. Every year since 2017, we have been appointing 2 youth delegates who, through a nationwide advocacy action and active participation in meetings at the UN, have been helping promote the active participation of the youngest generations in peace building and reconciliation processes. This is an example of how we can best increase youth participation. It is essential to make sure that young people, including young women, have a say in peace discussions, and we should encourage natural synergies between the WPS and the YPS agendas, as women and youth face similar challenges to their meaningful participation in the decision-making. Italy co-sponsored Resolution 2535 last July, funded the UN Desert Project Young People's Contributions to Sustainable Peace in the framework of the 2030 Agenda to promote the integrated implementation of the YPS and 2030 agendas. And we financed the 2020 Turin Forum for Sustaining Peace that was organized by the UN System Staff College with a focus on the synergies between the WPS and the YPS agendas. Mr. President, Italy will continue to do its utmost to advance the implementation of the YPS agenda. I thank you.
I thank Simona, representative of Italy, for the statement delivered on time. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to the Minister of Mexico. Mexico. Is it Bruno?
Gracias, señor presidente. Mexico thanks you and the organizers for convening this Arria-Formula meeting. The commemoration of the 5th anniversary of the adoption of Resolution 2250 is an opportunity to mainstream the implementation of the YPS agenda. We recognize the work of other UN bodies, such as the Peace Building Commission, in advancing this agenda, as well as efforts at the regional level. For Mexico, it is clear that sustaining peace and development, as well as global governance, must respond to the aspirations of our youth and ensure the enjoyment of their human rights. In this regard, the dialogue among generations becomes a unique tool in strengthening our societies by bringing together the perspectives of all members of communities in conflict and post-conflict situations and taking steps for recovery and prevention. The support provided by civil society organizations may enhance community-based approaches that complement policies undertaken by member states with the support of the UN system. In order to solve challenges that young people in Latin America face, we must develop strategy for violence prevention and peaceful conflict resolutions. In a social context in which the elderly have a major role in upbringing of youth, their guidance becomes crucial to avoiding extremism and radicalization. This past November, Mexico co-organized with the Government of Canada and the Organization of American States the webinar Preventing Violent Extremism, Good Practices and Youth Engagement Through Sports. We learned that the current COVID-19 pandemic has led to terrorist organizations seeking to increase the radicalization and recruitment of young people, who now spend more time on the internet. As a result, it is clear we must promote sports activities, which in turn strengthen social interactions, including with their elders. Young people are often the most affected by the impact of recruitment and extremist acts. However, it is also the youth who can make a long-lasting change by building more peaceful societies. Mexico believes in advancing towards a more systemic involvement of young people in the work of the Security Council. Moreover, the Council must strengthen the synergies between both the Youth Peace and Security Agenda and the Women Peace and Security Agendas, placing particular emphasis on incorporating the needs and perspectives of young women and girls and intergenerational dialogue. The Council should also strengthen the interaction of the Working Group on Children and Armed Conflict with the rest of the UN system. To conclude, we call on all member states to support measures to empower and promote the meaningful participation of youth, particularly in terms of conflict prevention, peace and security initiatives, humanitarian assistance, and peacekeeping operations. Many thanks, Mr. President.
I want to thank Bruno, the representative of Mexico, for the statement. And now I would like to call President of Bangladesh to deliver a statement. Rabib.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much, and it's so good to see you in the chair of the Security Council. I thank you, and I thank the co-organizers for organizing this meeting, and I thank you especially for accommodating me at this late hour. I wish to thank also the briefers for their valuable and inspiring remarks. Today's dialogue is particularly relevant, Mr. President, to remind ourselves of the far-reaching impact of the COVID-19 pandemic that has left on the youth. As we are currently negotiating the Peace Building Architecture Review, we must ensure that youth is made part of our common endeavor for peace building and sustaining peace. Mr. President, to optimize the role of youth in peace building and sustaining peace, we need to invest in strengthening the narratives on potentials of youth in peace building. Simultaneously, we also need to restore youth's trust in governments and multilateral systems. For that, we need to invest in fostering national and local level initiatives aimed at amplifying the participation of the youth in peace processes. In this regard, we need to take advantage of essential common threads of WPS and YPS. They need to reinforce each other in their efforts to overcome the traditional gender norms and practices which disproportionately impact on the potentials of young women in many contexts across the world. We believe that the Peace Building Commission has a role to play in this regard. And most importantly, we must ensure affordable, quality, inclusive, and transformative education to foster the youth's critical thinking and provide them with skill sets for building social cohesion, as well as civic and economic engagements. Eliminating existing digital divide is an important requisite for that. We also believe that involvement of youth in the promotion of tolerance within and across societies is particularly relevant, especially in countering hate speech and xenophobia, which is now sweeping the world. Madam President, while we celebrate the 5th anniversary of the YPS resolution, we would be interested to know how this has been integrated into the UN's work at the field level, particularly in the context of peace building and sustaining peace. And secondly, we would also like to know whether the Office of the Youth Envoy or any other UN entity has made any trend analysis on the impacts of COVID-19, as well as their involvement in the responses to COVID-19 and its impacts. I thank you, and in conclusion, I wish to reiterate Bangladesh's full commitment to implement the YPS agenda. And I thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
I thank the permanent representatives of Bangladesh for his statement. Would like to convey Ambassador Machila's apologies. He has had to step aside for a little bit to attend to other urgent matters of the Security Council. This concludes the segment on contributions by member states. And I would like to take this opportunity to also inform that we have received written statements from the delegations of Georgia, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland, which will be included in the compilation of the statements. I would like to now give the floor to the permanent representative of Kenya, our co-host, Ambassador Kimani. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity once again. My regards to Ambassador Jerry Machila. As we look ahead to our membership of the Council in just a few weeks' time, we want everyone in this forum to rest assured that our efforts will rest on the shoulders of those who came before and left their mark on behalf of young people. I recognize with gratitude the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan for introducing the 2250 initiative in the Council in 2015. I commend Peru and Sweden for spearheading Resolution 2419 in 2018, which is complementary to 2250 and that called on the full implementation of 2250. Lastly, but not least, I recognize and deeply appreciate South Africa's leadership in the 2019 presidential statement, which highlighted the YPS provisions in the AU Agenda 2063 and the invaluable role of African youth have and can play in silencing the guns in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Kenya is a running nation. So we take the baton seriously and will continue to run this race to win it for young people all over the world. I want to take this opportunity to thank the briefers for their insightful and comprehensive briefings. I also thank the participants for their statements. The discussions and the rich recommendations that have come out of this meeting have given our delegation food for thought and charged us to deepen our focus on promoting the meaningful participation and representation of youth in peace initiatives. Young people from all over the world have tuned in to listen to this discussion, and I commend them for taking the time and remaining engaged and having faith that they are part of the change that they seek to see. On our part, we will not disappoint them. We will seek to be dynamic and to fight any stagnation in the efforts that have been spoken of here today. Kenya, in partnership with the very able champions who are listening in and who are part of this forum, will build on this rich normative framework, including the most recent resolution 2535 adopted in April this year and spearheaded by the Dominican Republic and France, and we will add our efforts to theirs. We will count on all your continued support in this important global priority as we take up our position in the Security Council come January. Thank you.
I thank Ambassador Kimani for his remarks, and he is the incoming elected member of the Security Council, and indeed we will be passing the baton to you and other incoming members of the Council. I would like to take this opportunity to now conclude the Arria meeting of the Security Council. On behalf of Ambassador Machila, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our briefers once more for enriching the discussions today, and for the participants for adding their voices to strengthening the YPS agenda. I would also like to thank our viewers across all over the globe for tuning in large numbers. The numbers that we have seen today shows and illustrate the great interest that young people across the world and permanent representatives in New York and member states at the United Nations show in this topic, in this subject. And it is our belief that this is going to chart a way forward for the next 5 years and beyond. I would also like to thank our co-hosts, the Dominican Republic, Kenya, Norway, Ireland, France, Tunisia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Niger for co-hosting this event and making it a success that we believe it has turned out to be. And would also like to end by thanking Public Diplomacy Division of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation for making this event a great success. I would like to officially close this meeting and thank everyone for participating in this meeting. I thank you.